it'll be interesting to see between the battlegrounds which ones change from red to blue or blue to red, how big an issue Iraq was compared to the economy, and also, of course, in terms of support for Iraq or not.
Okay, speaking of red, it is hard to miss Kate Snow in this room, and I know Kate Snow has some Senate calls to make. Kate?
I figured red would stand out in here, Peter.
I have to tell you, Kate, just before you get too serious about this, one of the emails I've had already takes note of the fact that you and Linda Douglas are both wearing red, and people say, well, they must definitely be for Bush. And I think we could remind the May that in Washington, and certainly at the White House, it's a tradition to wear red, is it not?
Yes, it is, in the tradition of Nancy Reagan.
Good, thanks.
It means nothing. 9 races that we can talk about right now, Peter, in the Senate, where the polls have closed at 8 o'clock Eastern time. Let's get right to it. In Illinois, this was a very big race. You all probably know his face by now. Barack Obama, who gave the keynote address at the Democratic National Convention, has handily won, we can project at this hour. In Missouri, Kit Bond, we are projecting the winner. That is not a surprise either. That seat will stay Republican. In Florida, we do not have enough information yet to call this one, or to project this one, I should say. Betty Castor, the Democrat, running against the former Housing and Urban Development Secretary Mel Martinez, the Republican, and we just don't have enough information yet, but that is a very tight race and one to watch. Oklahoma, another tight race, and again, not enough information to call this yet, Peter. Tom Coburn, the Republican, against Brad Carson, the Democrat. That's Don Nichols' open seat. We're watching that closely. In Alabama, Richard Shelby, ABC News projecting that he has handily won his seat. He will go into his 4th term. In Connecticut, Chris Dodd, the Democrat, will retain that seat for the Democrats, and he will serve a 5th term. By the way, he's expecting his 2nd child at the age of 60. And New Hampshire, Judd Gregg, Senator, going into his 3rd term now. ABC News projects that he has beaten the woman known as Granny D, who was making a run at 94 years old. In Maryland, Barbara Mikulski, ABC News projecting, has retained that seat for the Democrats. In Pennsylvania, this one could be interesting. Not enough information yet to call this. Arlen Specter, the Republican, running against a Congressman, Joe Huffle. And in Kentucky, Peter, we mentioned this last hour, but now we are saying, based on our exit polling, that it is simply too close to project in this race. That could be a bad sign, potentially, for Senator Jim Bunning. It was a very wide margin at first, but now, very close race, came down to the wire.
Okay,
George Voinovich.
Sorry, my apologies.
Just a couple more. George Voinovich, we project, has won in Ohio. And in North Carolina, finally, we don't have enough information to call the open seat that was left by John Edwards when he went to run for vice president. Erskine Bowles, a former Clinton White House person, running against Richard Burr, a congressman. And just quickly, Peter, we wanted to just remind people the makeup of the Senate. There are currently 51 Republicans in the Senate, a very slight majority for the Republicans, 48 Democrats, 1 independent, Jim Jeffords, who votes with the Democrats. Tonight we have just about a third of the Senate up for grabs, as happens every couple of years. 9 of those races are considered close. We are watching them. The Democrats would have to win most of them to take control of the Senate, so it is an uphill battle for them. And so far tonight, 41 Republicans, and you saw 5 Democrats have won, 5 Republicans have won. So we're still watching things. We've still got 24 seats at stake.
Many thanks, Kate. We're going to go back and I think spend some time with that graphic in a while to see if we can further understand it as well. But as you were talking about North Carolina, I want to put up the old 2000 map here. And bear in mind that where we say possibilities here, this is just the 2000 map as it turned out in 2000. Don't even pay attention to the numbers for a second, just the reds and the blues. Because George Stephan was talking about North Carolina reminds me, we haven't talked very much about South Carolina or Virginia tonight, in which we have not yet got enough information to project them.
And that's a minor surprise. I mean, these polls closed at 7 and 7:30. Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, all states won quite handily by President Bush in 2000. The fact that we can't call them yet, that we don't have enough information yet, now we can't make any hard conclusions about that, but it is significant. I should point out, of course, that John Edwards is from North Carolina. That might make Senator Kerry a little more competitive there. And in Virginia, the Democrats had hoped early on that they would be able to compete there. They put a lot of money in early on, but they pulled it out in recent weeks. But they have the support of a Democratic governor, Mark Warner.
Very interesting. So as you look at those 2 states we've just been talking about, Virginia and I should say South Carolina, North Carolina, and 3 are ones we'll get back to. But that's the way the map looks at the moment. That is our live update. President Bush has 66 electoral votes. Senator Kerry has 74, and there is a long way to go. And a lot of states we have not been able to make a projection in because we simply do not have enough information in order to make a projection, and that means nothing is obvious. We'll be right back.
Vote 2004, Election Night. Brought to you by Chrysler. Inspiration comes standard. This ABC News special will continue in a moment. Live coverage of Vote 2004 continues. Here again, Peter Jennings.
We have a variety of maps and things to look at around here this evening. This is the big picture, of course, in the electoral competition with 270 needed. Mr. Bush has 66, Senator Kerry has 74. Doesn't mean a great deal yet because there have been no significant changes here. But the popular vote, of course, is very much on people's mind, given that it was won last time by Vice President Gore and Mr. Bush was elected the president. And again, that doesn't tell us very much, except with this amount of the popular vote counted, Mr. Kerry has 43% of it and Mr. Bush has 57%. I want to go to Boston now because ABC's Ted Koppel has joined our coverage this evening. Ted has been out with the last several days with Mr. Kerry, maybe not the last several days, but the last 24 hours anyway with Senator Kerry. What's it been like?
It only seems like several days, Peter. It's been 36 hours, and you know what it's like when you're inside one of the campaign bubbles. And I just sort of came out for a breath of fresh air, and I'll be diving right back into it after you and I talk. There is certainly a feeling of great enthusiasm about all the Democrats who are gathering here in Boston tonight. Ran into Senator Kennedy in the hotel lobby just a few minutes ago, and he says, we're going to sweep this thing. And I said, you mean the state of Massachusetts? He said, no, the whole thing, the whole country. You know, and I know, we have to be very, very careful at times like this not to get caught up in what is sometimes the false and calculated false optimism of a campaign that wants to convey an impression that may not yet necessarily be true. But I must tell you, you and I have been doing this for a very long time. It feels as though they really mean it when they come at us with this optimism right now. I think they believe that they can win. Now, obviously, there's a long night ahead before the proof is in.
Well, there is a long night ahead, and you're quite correct, as we have been repeatedly pointing out. Let's be cautious. Let's be conservative. This is a big country. There are many more results to come. But having said that, what's been like on the inside today? Who's been doing what? I saw one thing where Senator Kerry talked to 33 different affiliates.
Yeah, he has, in fact, I believe he just left about half an hour ago to go back to his home here in Boston to spend a couple of hours at home. He has been on the air almost continuously, I think since about 3 o'clock this afternoon, doing these satellite interviews with affiliated stations around the country. Now, about 10:30 this evening, we expect Senator John Edwards to come in, to come to the hotel here, and I'm going to be joining up with him to see what his thoughts are. And then he and Senator Kerry, when you smart guys in the anchor chairs start predicting that somebody is far enough ahead that they're going to win it, I think the expectation is that when that moment comes, then the two of them will come over here, where I am right now in Copley Plaza in Boston, for this open-air rally, which has gathered many, many thousands of people.
Well, I want to tell you this much, Ted. There'll be no predictions from this anchor chair, and I'm sure you approve of that. But let me ask you about Kerry himself. I was with him briefly in Iowa last week. We're always looking for the signs of Kerry the strong finisher, as he's so often described. I thought he was not as tired as anticipated. You know, we all needed the makeup after this kind of a campaign to make people look half awake at times. What's he like personally at the moment?
I've spent quite a bit of time with him over the past 36 hours, and I must tell you, he is energized. He can see the finish line. But again, you know, when someone sees the finish, I was with Bob Dole a number of years ago, and we were in Ohio campaigning toward the end of the campaign, and our bus, the campaign bus, took sort of a sharp U-turn, and he looked back at all the cars, the caravan of cars and buses, and said, looks kind of like a funeral procession. There is none of that from John Kerry these last 36 hours.
Okay, Ted, thanks very much. Look forward to talking to you again before the evening is over. And just to take a moment to check in on the Bush campaign. I think Terry Moran is still out at the White House. Am I right? Can I talk to Terry at the White House for just a second? Okay, well, let me go over and read his report just a minute, because he just said the White House, we've just been told at the White House the president is in the residence with about 25 to 30 family friends. Family buffet began about 7:30, included squash soup, smoked salmon. Pool reports are very, very precise, and as Terry, I think, has now joined us, will tell us, can be exhaustive, not to mention exhausting, Terry.
Well, it's a great service our colleagues provide, and we provide our colleagues. When you're in that pool, that group of reporters who is rotated through the week, tight with the president, you file those kinds of details for your colleagues. What I can also tell you, Peter, is that really the president is now sequestered with his closest friends and his family, and really just one aide has been up there, Karl Rove, his top strategist. This is a difficult moment for any candidate on tenterhooks, win, lose, draw, as we found out in 2000. These are tense moments, and the way the president has decided to do it is to surround himself with the people he's closest with.
Terry?
And they have that buffet there, yes.
Who are the closest friends, do you know?
Well, Mrs. Bush has invited some very close friends she's had since she grew up in Midland, and they are up there. They're very close to the president and the first lady. Friends from Texas and from Yale as well. They've asked us not to put the names out, which you can understand. But this is a president who has, in some ways, a knack for friendship, and some of these are very, very old friends indeed, as you'd expect on a night like this.
And on nights like this, exactly as you said, they are close friends. The president was or was not exhausted by the time he got down to Crawford to vote?
Well, he did look tired this morning, I will say that. This is a president who keeps regularly a very strict regimen. He's an early to bed, early to rise man. He's usually in his bedroom by 9:30 or so, lights out around 10, and that was not the case, let me tell you, over the past few days. And so he did look a little weary, but he's also, like a lot of politicians, a guy who draws energy from the crowds. And so he seemed to maintain his energy level. When he got back, he did, however, take some downtime before starting watching the results.
Great, many thanks, Terry, and also Ted Koppel with the respective campaigns for the moment. Take a look at the map, because this is what it looks like as of now, with a very small percentage of the vote counted in many parts of the country. No significant changes. Illinois, that blue one in the middle there, no change there. Indiana, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Kentucky, West Virginia, all these states now going as they did in 2000. So this election challenge of the battleground states is very much ahead of us for the rest of this evening. In many parts of the country, I hope you'll stay tuned for your local news now with complete details on your local races. ABC News' national coverage and international coverage is going to continue.
From WGNO New Orleans, this is ABC 26 News, The Votes.
Good evening, I'm Michael Hill.
And I'm Susan Rosgen. Tonight, Louisiana chooses our next U.S. Senator.
4 men are vying for the seat left empty by John Breaux. Liz Reyes is live in Kenner with the latest and the lone Republican contender, David Vitter. Liz?
Well, Michael and Susie, the jazz band is in place. I'm sure you can hear it behind me. The food is in place, and we're told David Vitter is still on the campaign trail at this hour, trying to reach as many voters as possible before the polls close in about half an hour. And just a short while ago, we spoke to his communications director to ask him what their expectations are tonight.
Well, we believe that we'll get, a very good, we'll finish #1, and we feel like we'll have a very good momentum going into the December 4th runoff.
So if we're talking figures tonight, we know 50+1 is a magical needed, but how close do you think you'll get to that percentage-wise tonight?
Anywhere from the mid-40s on.
Well, you just heard it from Mac Abrams, what figure they're looking at tonight. Clearly, they are ready for a runoff, and they say that's when the fight really begins, and when that they are ready, no matter whichever Democratic challenger they face off in that runoff. Michael and Susie.
All right, thank you, Liz. We'll check in with you again a little bit later.
Meanwhile, Paul Murphy is at Congressman Chris John's campaign headquarters at the Fairmont. Paul?
Susie, Chris John and his family will be watching the returns come in from their suite upstairs here at the Fairmont. They will basically be looking at two things: how well Chris John did in his home district, Louisiana's 7th congressional district in the Lake Charles Lafayette area, and how well Chris John did right here in New Orleans.
Precinct to precinct, we know where our strengths are, and that's in Acadiana and New Orleans. We did very well in Acadiana. and we did very well here, and certainly that's been a formula in the past that's been successful.
That, of course, is the combination that helped elect Kathleen Blanco during the last governor's race. Tonight, of course, it is a race for the Senate runoff. Chris John expects to make the cut.
All right, we'll see. Thank you, Paul. And of course, State Treasurer John Kennedy is also trying to squeeze into a runoff and keep the race alive to be our next senator. Kennedy is in Baton Rouge tonight.
And that's where we find reporter Gwen Campbell. Gwen?
It is early. The stage is set. Campaign workers just finished putting the finishing touches on the stage that you see behind me. Campaign workers said it has been a busy election day for John Kennedy, starting early this morning at 4 o'clock, getting out to vote at Mandeville High School along with his wife and son. John Kennedy says every vote counts, and he has spent every minute, he says, of the day appealing to voters to vote for him. On a night like tonight, most candidates will be looking for an outright win, but John Kennedy says he hopes tonight that this will put him in a position for a December runoff. And if you look at the polls, he says that could happen here tonight. So we're here. We'll bring you all the action as the votes come in. I'm in Baton Rouge. Back to you, Michael and Susan.
All right, thank you, Gwen. The final U.S. Senate contender, Arthur Morell, is with his family and supporters in downtown.
We'll be back in half an hour.
From ABC News Election Headquarters, this is Vote 2004. Once again, Peter Jennings.
Welcome back to our political coverage, our coverage of the election campaign 2004. As I said, there are more than 20,000 different races around the country at the national, state, and local level. And there are various propositions on the ballots all over the country today. So this is, as many people in the country have said, a deeply important election. For many people, it is the most important in their lifetime, they tell us. The polls have now closed. It's 8:30 Eastern Time, 5:30 in the West. The polls have now closed in one more state in Arkansas, so we can take a look at what might, under normal circumstances, be some projections. In North Carolina, ABC News now projects that North Carolina, John Edwards' home state, not that his addition to the ticket did put the state in play, it has gone to Mr. Bush, we project. 15 electoral votes in North Carolina going to Mr. Bush. In Maine, and this is a little more complicated than other places, we project that Senator Kerry has won most of the state, but he gets only 3 of the 4 electoral votes there because one congressional district is still undecided in this regard, and Maine is the only state in the union in which they divide their, I beg your pardon, and Nebraska, and one of only 2 in the country in which they divide the electoral vote. So we project that Maine has gone to Mr. Kerry, state where almost half of them identify themselves as independents, but there is one outstanding electoral vote there, and that's a big issue on a night like this. And finally, in Arkansas, with 6 electoral votes, the polls have closed, but we are not able to make a projection. However, in the state of Virginia, which we were talking about just a short while ago, where the polls closed at 7, Virginia hasn't voted for a Democrat since 1964. ABC News now projects that Mr. Bush is the winner there with 13 electoral votes. And there is the live update. As of now, on the ABC News map of the country, Mr. Bush has 94 electoral votes and Mr. Kerry has 77. And our guest here in the studio was the former mayor of New York, Rudolph Giuliani, who became regarded by so much of the world as an entirely different person after 9/11. Those of us in New York, sir, know you both well and have a great respect for you and your performance on 9/11. But nobody in this campaign has been more of an attacker on John Kerry for the Bush campaign than you. And I wanted to know if you want to be a little more charitable this evening.
I tried to point out the differences, which I think existed between the president and John Kerry. But at this point, it's all in the hands of the American people. And I believe the president's going to be reelected. I'm very hopeful that he will be, and it looks to me like he will be. But, you know, if he isn't, then we all have to get behind John Kerry. So
now, you're a politician with a very broad-based palette and may have an interest in higher office yourself. Put the war and terrorism in your own mind, not just the way the pollsters do it, in your own mind, up there along with the economy and people's moral and character issues, and tell me what you think is the list of importance.
I think terrorism, the war, the combined issue, the terrorism and the war in Iraq, Afghanistan has to be the prevailing issue and the one why people, the reason why people are describing this as the most important election they've ever voted in. You hear a lot of people saying that. I think because this country is at war, and we realize it's a significant war, and it's one that's very, very complex and very difficult. So I think that has to be, it's at least the overarching issue that makes this such a compelling election.
As you've traveled around the country, does it really feel like a country at war to you?
Yes, in some ways yes, some ways no. If you start discussing it politically and you start talking about the things that are organizing people and energizing them, it does. It doesn't feel like a country at war. Whenever a war is taking place far away, it's removed and it's somewhat of an abstraction.
I notice here in New York, those of us who live here in New York, we do not have as many people from New York City, it seems, serving in Iraq. You go to Ohio, you go to Wisconsin, Iowa, it's impossible not to run into somebody who hasn't got a family member in the service.
Yeah, I think that's correct, and therefore, in that sense, it means more to them. On the other hand, we were the center, in essence, of the terrorist attack. New York, New Jersey. So I think that in some ways that keeps it in the forefront of our minds.
What was all this about New Jersey tonight? You know, the Republicans seem to want to put New Jersey in play for a while. It doesn't seem to have been the case particularly. What was that all about?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe it was wishful thinking. Maybe it was a little bit of everybody trying to maneuver each other. Probably a combination of both. I mean, I think this election is going to come down to the states that everybody has located as the key states: Florida, Ohio, Wisconsin, Minnesota. That's the place this election is going to get decided.
Vice President Cheney is one of those who has said fairly explicitly in the course of the campaign that he thinks we're going to have another attack in the country and that we might be at greater risk if John Kerry were actually the president. Now, you're a very practical man with a lot of international experience. Do you really believe that?
I do believe we're going to have another attack.
Do you really believe that the country is more vulnerable no matter who's the president?
I certainly believe that the country was safe with George Bush, and maybe during the campaign there was a reluctance to make that point too powerfully, that George Bush has kept us safe for 3 years, which I think is a remarkable achievement. On September 11, 2001, or when I came to your studios when the anthrax was here,
right,
I would have predicted for you, the FBI was telling me this, the police, we were going to get attacked. We were going to get attacked, I wouldn't say frequently, but we were going to be attacked over the course of the next 2 to 3 years. I think what George Bush has done by going on offense against terrorism, both in Afghanistan and Iraq, has assisted in keeping us safe. And because we all feel there's going to be another attack, we're somewhat reluctant to say that. But I think that's just the reality. I mean, we have been safe for the last 3 years, and most people would not have predicted that back on September 11th.
You've done a lot of campaigning for the president back and forth across the country. What have you learned about the country most that you didn't know before? Oh, I think I've learned a lot about the country. I mean, I've learned about how people are very much similar. It's remarkable to me that people in South Carolina and people in Minnesota and people in Virginia and all the different parts of the country pretty much are focused on the same things. It's not as different a country as it appears to be. And the other thing I think is going to be a lot easier than people realize is for the country to come together. When President Bush is reelected, or if it comes out the other way, as long as the person who wins reaches out to the other side, invites them in, maybe puts a few people in the cabinet from the other party, I think you'll see the country come together a lot faster than people realize. Well, it's a nice, we don't hear that kind of optimism from everybody else. It's really nice to see you. I'm an optimist. Thank you. Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York, huge spokesman for President Bush in this campaign, and as the president and everybody around Mr. Giuliani would acknowledge, a huge asset for President Bush. We're now going to be able to make a projection in the state of South Carolina. The polls close at 7 o'clock. We were very conservative about making this call, or for that matter any other call this evening, given what happened in 2000. But we now project that George W. Bush is the winner in South Carolina. The last time South Carolina voted for a Democrat was Jimmy Carter in 1976, and there is how the map and the number of electoral votes actually changes, going to 102 for Mr. Bush and 77 for Mr. Kerry. You can see that there's been no projection in Florida, been no projection in Ohio. I want to ask our political director, Mark Halpern, to talk a little bit about Florida, if you would, at the moment, because one of the questions in a number of states, but certainly in Florida, is how good people feel about the system. We talked about it earlier, and how safe they feel their vote is in this instance.
We talked about it nationally, and we thought with pretty good news, nationally 9% of people are confident that their vote will count. 90%, that 9% that the vote in their state will count. But you see there, in Florida, 24% had some doubt did not have confidence today in the preliminary numbers. 24% of Floridians had some doubt that their vote would count. That is obviously a much higher number, and obviously no surprise because of the problems Florida had. We've not projected a winner there. It seems like it could well be close, and obviously the people of Florida and the people of America may well be concerned if in the end a lot of Floridians have doubt. And Peter, again, the preliminary numbers say that an even higher number of African Americans in Florida, 44%, don't have confidence that their vote will be counted today.
And yet, interestingly, I might ask Jake Tapper about this as well as you. Interestingly, we haven't heard any particular complaints from Florida today, have we, about the system?
We've not heard widespread complaints, the kinds of things we saw with the famous butterfly ballot, with voters afraid that they voted either for the wrong person or a so-called overvote voting twice. What we do have is a lot of people voting by absentee ballot, by so-called early vote, and by provisional ballot. And these are the kind of ballots that may take days to be counted, and that could cause some measure of controversy as the country waits for a president.
We should slow down for just a second and talk precisely about this. Jake Tapper, provisional ballots, what are they? How widespread are they? They're national, of course. Why are they available this year?
Well, there was concern after the Florida recount in 2000 that there were voters that did not have their vote counted. So when Congress passed the Help America Vote Act in 2002, one of the things they did is they required all states to offer provisional ballots. This is what they are. If you go to the voting rolls and your name is not there, but you are convinced that you are a voter at that precinct, you get a provisional ballot. You vote that day and you hand it in. And then after Election Day, after your eligibility can be determined, if you are an eligible voter, then that provisional ballot will count. And there are literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of these provisional ballots being cast today. And this will complicate matters, especially in close states like Ohio and Florida.
Am I right in Ohio that the provisional ballots may not be counted for 10 days?
You're right that there are that each state makes its own rules when it comes to provisional ballots, and some states it will be 10 days, some days it will be quicker than that. But each ballot, each provisional ballot, the eligibility of the voter has to be determined. That is a very time-staking process, as you might imagine. So it could take up to 10 days in several states.
Now somebody's put up a fascinating graphic. Oh, please don't take it away. They put up a fascinating graphic behind you. Now let's talk about it. It's an amazing colors.
These are all the different methods of voting in every different state. And you can see that the green represent electronic machines. The red represent OptiScan, like the SATs. The yellow represent punch card ballots. And this is Ohio, and you can see it is mostly a punch card ballot state.
Many thanks, Jake. I want to talk to George Will now for a moment about Florida. This is a deeply, deeply important state for Senator Kerry.
It's very far south, but socially it's probably more like New Jersey than it is the rest of the South. But still, it's part of the South. And to understand its importance, look at this. If you take the 11 states of the old Confederacy, of which Florida was one, and add 3 others, Oklahoma, Kentucky, and West Virginia, they have 173 electoral votes. If you don't get something down there, if John Kerry were to be swept in the South, he would have to then carry 74% of all the electoral votes outside those 14 states. That's that's drawing to an inside straight. That's why they really want to make Florida competitive.
In some respects, Florida is, as much as Ohio used to be thought of, a microcosm of America in the 21st century.
It is. I mean, Miami is certainly as international a city as you can find, comparable to Los Angeles in that sense, comparable to New York, I suppose. A great melting pot of, some would say, unmelted ethnics so far, but a complicated political equation.
It's also a fascinating example of why the Electoral College is so important, because there's been a lot of upset this year that of the 4 biggest states, only Florida has really been in play, and that people have paid attention, with New York and California and Texas already decided. But the truth is, when you have a place like Florida that is in contention, you have to pay attention to the Jewish vote, which is a tiny percentage of the vote nationwide, the Cuban Cuban vote, the Haitian
non-Cuban
vote,
Latino vote, right?
So that it really shows you what the founders had in mind about protecting minorities against the tyranny of the majority when you see how the Electoral College plays out in a state like Florida. Another very, very important thing to watch in Florida this year is the Senate race, where you have a
Mel
Latino
Martinez and Betty Castro.
and, who is running, and the Republicans have put high hopes on him, thought he was the great star of the future. It seems to be very close.
George. The indelible image of Florida last time were those people holding up the chads and looking for pregnant chads and dimpled chads and hanging chads. You said a moment ago, in Ohio, the provisional ballots may not be counted for 10 days. Counting hardly does justice to this. Provisional ballots almost have to be adjudicated.
Right. One by one.
That's right. You pick up it's one thing to say the Chad is there. It's not there. It's another thing to say this provisional ballot, did they live here? Did they vote in the right precinct? Were they properly identified? This could be very protracted.
And nobody has a clue.
One comment from Fareed on this, but just to remind people that the provisional ballot is given to somebody who wants to vote on Election Day and may have showed up at the wrong precinct, may have showed up with the improper identification, but it is an attempt to be inclusive.
It is an attempt to be inclusive, and that is one value. There is a competing value, that is, beyond inclusiveness, and that is a timely decision on the Chief Executive of the United States. And we may have sacrificed that with the Help America Vote Act and the mad proliferation of provisional ballots.
Last comment for the moment to you, Fareed.
Well, I think we made it worse, perhaps by lawyers in the Help America Vote Act, but certainly by the Supreme Court decision of Bush v. Gore, which opened up a hornet's nest of claims on the Equal Protection Clause, saying that if different counties have different standards or different ballots are judged differently, this all might be a violation of your rights as an American. If there are close races, I think the Supreme Court has a lot more to answer for than Congress.
All of this under the heading Making Democracy Easier for Everybody. John Quinones in Florida for us tonight, which, as you notice, we have not projected a winner in Florida, and I can't tell you we're likely to for some time or not. But John Quinones is there. John?
Peter, I'm standing outside the building, the Miami-Dade building, where they're counting that vote tonight. Inside, those tabulators will go through the night. Again, as you've said, the election too close to call. There's still long lines at some precincts here, long after the polls have closed in Coral Gables, Pinellas County to the left, folks waiting for another 2 hours, we understand, to cast their ballots. Perhaps as an indication of how close this election is, the Republican Party here in Dade County has issued us an email telling us, it's a cautionary note, telling us that absentee ballots won't be counted here for a day, perhaps several days. They're concerned that the Democrats may claim too early a victory when they claim, the Republicans claim, that they have a 2-to-1 margin in those absentee ballots. Again, they're telling now the Democrats not to claim an early victory because there's still maybe 100,000 votes outstanding in Dade County alone. Peter?
Thanks very much, John. Very helpful getting that first-hand look from Florida this evening, which we'll do throughout the evening. Just reminding you that in Florida, Ohio, Wisconsin, Iowa, New Mexico, these are states which are unquestionably battleground states and may remain so for much of the evening, which is why under this new system we've established since 2000, we will be as cautious as we can. We'll be right back after this.
Vote 2004, Election Night. Brought to you by Capital One. What's in your wallet? This ABC News special will continue in a moment. This ABC News special, Election Night 2004, continues. Once again, Peter Jennings.
Those poll closing times you just looked at on the screen are in Eastern time. I know that offends people out on the west coast of the United States, which of course it should. And we always demand of Westerners that they do the mathematics rather than us on the East Coast, and that is a pity. Joining us now, speaking for Senator Kerry and the Democratic Party, is former Senator Robert Kerry, Bob Kerry. It's never been Robert, it's always been Bob.
Always been Bob.
Yeah, exactly, my apologies. Now, you've been out to a couple of parties in New York, you told me when you arrived. What's the mood among Democrats here tonight?
Well, these are Kerry supporters, so they're guardedly optimistic. I mean, they were a surprisingly strong showing in Pennsylvania, surprisingly strong showing in New Hampshire, and it feels good in Minnesota and Wisconsin. And so, you know, it's all down to Ohio and Florida, and the early numbers look good there as well. So I would say guardedly optimistic.
This is not your home, of course. You're here as president of the New School now. Yeah. You ever feel like a fish out of water in New York City? It doesn't feel like the rest of the country, does it?
Well, it's very blue here, you know. So yeah, it's a it's a much different political environment than I'm used to in Nebraska.
When you look back over the year, did you think it would be possible the country would be involved in this much of a tug of war?
Well, I must say, yes, it felt like it in 2000, although it stopped after 9/11 up through, I'd say, February, March of 2002. But both because the president decided to become extremely partisan on national security issues in the off-year election, and because of the way he conducted the war in Iraq, all that's gone. So we're back to where we were in 2000.
If the president wins again this evening, is it fair to assume that the Democratic Party would hand Senator Kerry his head on a platter?
Oh, I don't think so. I think almost everybody that watched John in his campaign has to say that he did exceptionally well in the debates. He did exceptionally well in the campaign. I mean, standing on the sidelines, you can always find things that you think you would have done better. But no, I think he's going to emerge from this. First of all, I think he's going to win. But if he were somehow miraculously not to win, I think people are going to give him a great deal of credit for the way he conducted himself.
We all think at this particular moment in the evening it is close. Do you think it should be this close?
Well, it doesn't feel like it should be this close, frankly. And I think a lot of that has to do with some success at persuading Americans you can't trust John on national security and terrorism. And I've heard the mayor talking about how President Bush kept us safe. But John supported the war in Afghanistan, and it's been the war in Afghanistan that dramatically reduced the threat of terrorism against the United States. The international cooperation we put together, and by the way, now Pakistan and Saudi Arabia understand that there could be victims of terrorism too. So the threat has been substantially reduced, and now it's shifted to Iraq. If you're one of the 138,000 soldiers over there, you got a problem, right? Because you're now you're experiencing jihadists coming into Iraq trying to kill you.
You had a notion at one point in your career of being a president. You were a presidential candidate at one point. You ever miss it when the campaign's like this?
No. I like going out. I mean, I do like politics a lot. I think it's a very important activity, and I feel like I'm still relatively good at it, so I enjoy doing it. And my board lets me do it. So,
what basis do you think the country might come together in the wake of tonight, no matter which man wins?
It's going to take presidential leadership, and with great respect to Mayor Giuliani, a lot more than just putting a couple people on a cabinet. You're going to have to. You can't be bipartisan in the end if you're not willing to be bipartisan in the beginning. And there's an awful lot of people out there who are voting because of their view on abortion, because of their view on homosexuality, because of their view on values-based issues. And those are exceptionally difficult issues to reach compromise on. Very difficult issues to reach compromise on.
And finally, what's the one thing about the campaign that has really utterly turned you off?
Oh, God, I mean, it's politics. I mean, the fact of the matter is it's nowhere near as difficult. I suppose maybe $5 billion being spent on it, but, we probably spend twice that on dog food for all I know. Mm-hmm. So even that isn't necessarily alarming. I think it's been a very exciting campaign, 3 terrific debates, 2 good candidates, and I think the American people have been treated to a very good campaign.
Thank you for the time. Former Senator Bob Kerry, now president of the New School. We're going to take another short break for local news in many parts of the country, so you can get caught up in your local races. ABC News national and international coverage will continue. Thank you, Senator Kerry.
From WGNO New Orleans, this is ABC 26 News, The Votes.
Good evening again. I'm Michael Hill.
And I'm Susan Rosgen. Now, tonight, voting activists have filed a lawsuit to keep New Orleans polling places open until 10 p.m. This lawsuit claims that the problems at the polls today kept a large number of voters from casting ballots.
Now, on that ballot, a New Orleans criminal sheriff for the parish. The candidates for the job, Warren Riley and Marlon Gusman. Kurt Spring is live at the Gusman headquarters in the Warehouse District. Kurt?
Well, guys, Marlon Gusman finished first in the primary for Orleans Parish criminal sheriff. He certainly hopes to do the same here again tonight. And to try to help get that done, he has been campaigning all day long, shaking every available hand that he can, touring the city in his campaign bus. This has also been a very difficult race, a tough race with some very pointed TV ads. I asked Councilman Gusman about the ads and if this has been a tough race, but he would not call it a nasty race.
Campaigns ought to be about the record, and they ought to be about, what you've done to prepare yourself for elective office.
Now, we're at a hotel here in the Warehouse District, the same one that we were at for the primary. Mr. Gusman is not here yet. We do expect him here later on this evening. But frankly, as much campaigning as he has done in the primary and today, we don't expect him here until much later this evening. Susan, Michael?
All right, thank you, Kara.
And now we'll go to Glenn Boyd, who is live at Warren Riley's headquarters downtown. Glenn?
Yes, Susie, we are here at the Fairmont in the Blue Room, and I tell you one thing, that the Warren Raleigh campaign is feeling good because of a poll just Friday, a tracking poll they had showed them 9 points ahead. I just learned that, and with me is Eugene Green, campaign manager for Warren Raleigh. What does it look like on the street?
Well, it's important to note that we discounted the poll and went out there and tried to get the vote however we could. We talked to people, we shook their hands. I feel very confident that people, Glenn, recognized that this law enforcement position of criminal sheriff needed to be occupied by somebody who was committed to reducing crime in our city and committed to moving our city forward in terms of law enforcement issues.
Quickly, this would be a huge upset if this holds true. We don't know that so far. It polls few minutes, people are still voting in line. But Warren Raleigh had the whole political establishment, it seems, even the governor against him in this race.
Glenn, I must say I'm very confident that we are going to have gotten our message across to voters such that we will be victorious on this evening, and it will be one of the most tremendous electoral victories in the history of this state. National opposition in terms of a United States senator, governor, lieutenant governor, state attorney general, all of the city council, all of the major political organizations, the interim sheriff, so many opposed to his candidacy, and Warren Riley still stayed on his message of crime prevention.
Thank you very much, Eugene Green.
Looking forward to seeing you.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Susie, back to you.
All right, thank you, Glenn. Michael?
The polls have now closed in Louisiana. Tonight, Louisiana voters will choose 3 new members of the U.S. House. Of those 3 open seats, only one is expected to be decided tonight, and that's the seat Congressman David Vitter is vacating. Dawn Ostrom spent the night with Republican candidate Bobby Jindal. Dawn?
Michael, the Republicans are getting ready to party here in Metairie. They've been expecting a Bobby Jindal win ever since Steve Scalise dropped out of this race back in August. The last polling data we saw in this race, Bobby Jindal with 73% of the vote. So he's been working hard to avoid a runoff. He also says he's already working hard on what he'll do in Washington.
And so we've already started making relationships with others across the country. We've reached out to leadership. We've reached out to other freshman congressmen. That's very important. We're losing a seat on appropriations. We're losing 2 seats on energy and commerce. For Louisiana's sake, for the 1st district's sake, we need to hit the ground running. So we are beginning to build those relationships and reach out to others so they'll be interested and they'll be aware of Louisiana's issues.
This race hasn't drawn much national attention, but Bobby Jindal has drawn national attention. He's been profiled as one of the top 5 GOP rising stars. Michael?
All right, thank you, Dawn. Susie?
Well, another campaign that's been full of attack ads is the race for Public Service Commission. State Senator Cleo Fields is running against New Orleans Constable Lambert Boissiere, and Meredith Mendez has more from the Boissiere camp. Meredith.
Well, Susan, campaign workers have the balloons ready here at UNO for tonight's party for candidate Lambert Boissiere. In the past 2 weeks, the race for the Public Service Commission's 3rd District seat has taken a twist with accusing ads on both sides. Opponent Cleo Fields has spent much of his time campaigning here in New Orleans. And with 60% of the district's voters living in Orleans and Jefferson parishes, this is very likely where this election will be won or lost. Right now, Boissiere is finishing up some last-minute campaigning, and he's expected here at his party around 8:45 tonight. Michael, Susan.
All right, thank you, Meredith. And we do have a news crew outside of Judge Sidney Cates' office right now to find out whether he will or will not extend the deadline for polling in Orleans Parish. Stay with us for our coverage throughout the evening.
And log on to NOLA.com for forums and polls throughout the evening. We'll be back here with another cut-in at 8:25. Thank you for watching.
Just a few seconds to allow some of our affiliates around the country to join us. Our coverage continues in about a second.
This is an ABC News special. The 2004 vote. Today, all across the country, Americans cast their vote. And tonight, it all comes down to this: election night. Now reporting from ABC News election headquarters in New York, Peter Jennings.
We'll take a look at the map again. That's the most important thing. This is our live update as of now. It is 9 o'clock in the east, 6 o'clock in the west. Mr. Bush has 155 electoral votes. Mr. Kerry has 112. It's hard to design a story out of this because George Stephanopoulos, the middle of the country here, all the way from Texas up to North Dakota, is as it was in 2004.
I think the headline so far is no surprises. The red states that were red last time are red this time. The blue states that were blue last time are blue this time. All of the battlegrounds that we've been talking about for so many months, about 10 states that have been hotly contested over the last several weeks, all of those right now are too close to call.
And you did make one, I thought, excellent footnote when I was making an observation about Rhode Island, which has always been Democratic. You pointed to their Republican senator.
They have a Republican senator, Lincoln Chafee, but that Republican senator was very vocal in his expression. He said, I'm not going to vote for President Bush. I'm going to write someone else in, maybe even President Bush's father.
Now, there are a lot of streams of information coming into this institution this evening, and you've been on the phone all day. Very simply, what do you think so far?
I think this is about what we expected. We expected the red states to go red, the blue states to go blue, and we did expect that it would be a relatively long evening as we looked at all of these battleground states, and that makes sense. If the campaigns are going to spend so much time, so much money, so much energy on those states, and they know a lot about them, you would expect them at the end of the day to be close.
I want to use our map again, if we can put it up one more again, to just put in what we're talking about this evening in terms of the battleground states.
New Hampshire.
Florida, very much. New Hampshire, still very much a battleground state. Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Ohio,
Pennsylvania,
and still certainly Pennsylvania.
Oh, no question about it.
And of course New Mexico, and I know you like to put Arizona on there, or rather Nevada on there as well. So that's where the battle is going to be fought in the course of the remainder of the evening. Let's just take one, Wisconsin.
Wisconsin was a state that had a Republican governor until recently. President Bush tried very hard to win that state. It was very close in 2000, only a few thousand votes separated. Governor Bush at that time and Vice President Gore, so the president went hard at that state. For a Midwestern state, it's got a heavy proportion of Catholics. 35% of the electorate is Catholic, culturally conservative. The economy did a little bit better than Ohio. That's why President Bush thought he had a chance there. Lots of gun owners.
It's interesting, ABC's Betsy Stark was pointing out this evening that if people were voting the economy today, Mr. Kerry would pretty much automatically win in Ohio, where the economy has been very bad, 280,000 jobs lost, and would be absolutely winning in Florida, where the economy has been particularly good.
Well, President Bush would be winning in Florida, where the economy is doing well. Wisconsin and Iowa are kind of on the bubble, and that's why they've been battleground states this time. They have many growing sectors. They lost some manufacturing jobs, but not as bad as Ohio.
Why do you like Nevada as a battleground state at the moment?
Clark County. Clark County is where Las Vegas is. A lot of new voters, a lot of immigrants.
Second fastest, if not the fastest growing city in the country.
Exactly. Heavily unionized as well. Democrats have put a huge effort into Nevada. And secondly, the issue of Yucca Mountain. Our viewers may not know a lot about this issue, but there's a nuclear waste repository called Yucca Mountain in Nevada. President Bush in the 2000 campaign promised not to have the waste stored there anymore. The Nevadans believe, and Senator Kerry certainly tried to reinforce that belief, that President Bush went back on that promise. It still hasn't been concluded, but that's been a big issue there.
I was interested in looking at Nevada. Let's go back, by the way, to reality for a moment. This is what it looks like actually at the moment. We've got our battleground states. It was really interesting to see Senator Kerry argue so forcefully that Yucca Mountain would not be the depository. But it almost didn't say anything else that mattered to some people in Nevada.
No, but that matters an awful lot in Nevada.
Huge.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that was, in fact, he was advertising in Nevada in the month of August when he wasn't advertising in a lot of other states with that direct message straight to the camera.
Las Vegas, one of the most astonishing cities in the Western or the Eastern world, and as we were pointing out, one of the fastest growing in the country with all of the attendant joys and problems as well. Kate Snow, who covers the Senate for us, is going to take the latest look at the Senate races. Kate?
We've got a bunch to go through, Peter, and we're going to start with one of the most interesting races in the nation, I think safe to say. In South Dakota, Tom Daschle, the Democratic leader of the Senate, the Democratic leader, is fighting for this seat, and he knew he would. We do not have enough information yet to call this race, but he started advertising last year. That's how tight this race has become. In Arizona, no surprise, John McCain, the well-known senator who ran for president and may do so again, is the projected winner there. In Wisconsin, Russ Feingold, a popular senator there, we project he has won a third term. In Colorado, the open seat, where Ben Nighthorse Campbell retired, a Republican retired. We are now saying we don't have enough information to call this yet. It is Peter Coors of the Coors Brewing Company against Ken Salazar, the Democrat. We're watching that closely. In Louisiana, an interesting race there. We've got 4 candidates. Louisiana does things a little bit differently. We don't have enough information yet to tell you whether any one of those candidates has reached the 50% threshold they need to reach to win outright without having to go to another race in December. In New York, Chuck Schumer, popular first-term senator, will now enter a second term, we project. In Kansas, Sam Brownback, a conservative, will go into his second term, we project. In North Dakota, Byron Dorgan, the junior senator from there, we project the winner. In Oklahoma, this is an interesting one. Tom Coburn and Brad Carson, the Democrat. This was the seat where Don Nichols, a Republican, retired, and we now project that Tom Coburn, the Republican, will retain that seat for the Republican Party. That was a very bitterly fought race. In Kentucky, too close to project, but Peter, I want to show you the numbers now because we're getting some numbers in. With 87% of precincts reporting, it is an even race, and this is startling because Jim Bunning had been so far ahead, and this race just in recent weeks has gotten extremely tight. The Democrats could take that seat. In Arkansas, Blanche Lincoln, the projected winner, that was expected as well, Peter.
Thanks very much, Kate. Kate Snow on the Senate races, which leads me actually to invite the comment from ABC's Cokie Roberts, who spent I say this every 4 years, so I spent your entire life up on the Congress, Dad.
And every 4 years it gets longer.
Well, I know, but it doesn't seem like it when I look at it. You pointed out we have several red states with blue senators.
That's right. And looking at these calls that we've made so far tonight, you look at someplace like West Virginia, which has gone for Bush, Senators Rockefeller and Byrd, both Democrats. Indiana, elected tonight, George Bush and Evan Bayh, a Democratic senator. You have Nebraska, a big Republican state with Ben Nelson, a Democrat. North Dakota, we've called for Bush, 2 Democratic senators. And then places like Delaware, a Republican, which we've called for Kerry, a Republican senator. Maine, called for Kerry, 2 Republican senators. Rhode Island, we've already talked about. So what I think that the reason for pointing this out is we've talked a lot about how polarized the country is and how people are going to feel very offended one way or the other, regardless of who wins tonight. It's going to be these senators from these states who are going to have to take the lead along with whomever is elected president in trying to bring the country together for governing, because they will be people who have been elected from states where they know their voters have voted for the opposite party for president, and they'll have to be listening to those voters and talking to those voters.
Many thanks, Cokie. Really nice to have you here, as always. Just 2 observations about 2 very different kind of things. Senator Schumer, I think I said earlier that those of us who live in New York, among some other states in the country, California being one, have been totally spared political advertising this year, except for Senator Schumer, who had no particular competition this year and was all over television in the last little while. George, I think there was some suggestion there that maybe Senator Schumer might be interested in being governor someday.
That's right. He's got a big bankroll, and he wanted to spend it to increase his name recognition.
Quite amazing. Every time you turned on television here, you saw Senator Schumer.
And he is looking at the governor's race in 2 years, also against a very popular Attorney General, Eliot Spitzer.
That's right, who's also made a lot of headlines. I want to talk to Mark to talk about one of the meanest Senate races in the country, and this is the one in South Dakota, where Senator Daschle has been campaigned against by even his allegedly respectable opposite number in the Senate.
Every 4 years when there's a presidential race, the so-called down-ballot races, the other races in the country, don't get much attention. South Dakota has a pretty interesting race. The Democratic leader of the Senate, Tom Daschle, an incumbent, by his own admission, somewhat out of step with the state on a lot of the issues, particularly social issues, government spending issues. He has worked very hard to hold his seat, but it has been tough. And he is probably, I would say, the president's least favorite Democrat in Washington. So the president's political operation, South Dakota, a state we've already projected for the president's political operation focused on that state, even though they knew the president would win.
Senator Frist, which is a big surprise.
Mostly the Senate over the years has been a place of 100, the most exclusive club, 100 members getting along without regard to party. But The Republicans wanted to beat Senator Daschle, so Senator Frist, in something of an unorthodox move, went there and campaigned against Tom Daschle, his opposite leader.
Let me ask you first and then George Stephanopoulos this, because Senator Daschle has argued this year that his seniority in the Senate brings benefits, by which he means pork, to South Dakota. You'd think people would buy into that election, into that notion in very considerable ways.
Well, it's important. A lot of smaller states, of course, get a lot of their power in Washington because every state gets 2 senators, regardless of size. Tom Daschle has not just seniority, but leadership. And so a lot of South Dakotans, regardless of party, they're attracted to that, but they also see Tom Daschle, as I said, as someone who may not agree with them on a lot of important issues.
And also, George, just one comment, if you would, seen very much as an obstructionist or portrayed very much as an obstructionist
that
by
was
the
one of the big
Republicans.
arguments of Mr. Thune, but I mean, that shows the whole strategy. John Thune was trying to make this a national race. Tom Daschle was trying to make it a local race.
Very interesting. Many thanks to both of you. Our coverage of the 2004 election will continue in just a moment, and I'm going to go around the country and talk to some of our correspondents about the mood out there and at the various campaign headquarters when we come back.
Vote 2004 Election Night. Brought to you by Chrysler. Inspiration comes standard. This ABC News special will continue in a moment. This ABC News special, Vote 2004 Election Night, continues. Once again, Peter Jennings.
The White House on election night, November the 2nd, 2004, the President, Mrs. Bush, there in their private quarters with, as Terry Moran described it earlier, got some beautiful, beautiful, oh, stay with it for just 1 second. It's just the most beautiful picture in the world. And no matter how people in other countries feel about the president at any given moment, it is this country the envy of so many other countries in the world. Still long lines in lots of places around the country. Still a big issue about absentee ballots and how to take them into account when trying to make some judgments about this evening. Similarly about these provisional ballots, which have been available to people all over the country if they show up at a polling place with the wrong identification or they show up in the wrong place. And ABC, of course, is everywhere in the country tonight. I just want to check in with a few more people in terms of mood and go first to Wisconsin, to Milwaukee, where our correspondent is ABC's Barbara Pinto. Barbara?
Good evening, Peter. The mood today at the polls was determined, and so many people showed up here in Wisconsin. Over my shoulder, you can see they are counting absentee ballots. The last voter filed her ballot here in person just about 15 minutes ago, came to this polling place at the Milwaukee Police Athletic League Center, and they had a record number of voters here for a presidential election. They exceeded the turnout in 2000 here, and we saw large numbers of voters around Wisconsin as we visited polling places today. We started at about 7 this morning. In one of the polling places we visited, people had a 3-hour wait online. About 15 of the polling places in the city of Milwaukee had to ask for extra ballots this evening. The good news here is that we will have some sort of clear sense about the outcome by the end of tonight or early tomorrow morning, because all of the votes get counted along with the absentee ballots. They have to be in by the close of the polls today. The one wild card here, though, is that Wisconsin has same-day voter registration, so people can show up at the polls with an ID or even a friend to vouch for them, to say that they live in the neighborhood and they can vote. So we saw a lot of new voters today, met a lot of new voters today.
Many thanks, Barbara Pinto, very much. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I want to go quickly to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where our correspondent is John Donvan and where the polls closed only about 20 minutes ago. John?
And Peter, it's great to be a small state and a toss-up state. President Bush was here yesterday only, and John Kerry was here for over the past several days, for several days in a row. People are loving the attention and knowing it's going to be fleeting. At this point, I'm in a warehouse on the edge of town where the absentee ballots are being counted, and those are significant in this state because so many people voted early or voted by absentee. Something like half the state voted that way. Another thing taking place here is a very large number of provisional ballots. Jake Tapper was talking before about the meaning of provisional ballots, and in this county alone there is something like 4,000. Why that may count, if this thing happens to come down to New Mexico, a tie everywhere else, and it comes down to New Mexico's 5 little votes, the provisional ballots could make the difference. This vote went for Al Gore by only 336 votes last time. There are 4,000 provisional ballots in this state alone which won't be counted for at least a week. So if it were to be a New Mexico cliffhanger, we wouldn't know the result for days and days.
Thank you very much, John. John Donvan in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I want to go very quickly to Claire Shipman, who's in Columbus, Ohio. Claire?
Peter, the polls may be closed here, but people are going to be voting well into the night. It's been a massive turnout in Ohio, and if you were in line by 7:30, you're still going to get to vote tonight. And that means in a lot of polling places around Columbus and Cleveland, people are still lined up in what they're estimating to be lines that could take 5 hours to vote. In fact, the situation for some people has grown so frustrating that the Democratic Party has filed a suit asking that these people be able to vote by other means, maybe some sort of paper ballot that might be quicker. It's not clear that that's going to happen, but the Democrats are clearly concerned because they think a lot of these late voters are going to vote Democratic and they want them to stay at the polls. But otherwise, Peter, all of the other projected problems in Ohio, the legal problems, the tensions, none of that really materialized at the polls today. Yes, there were the poll challengers. Federal appeals court ruling allowed the poll challengers to come to the polls today, but there really wasn't much challenging, no confrontation. It was mostly observation. The big story here, a big turnout and a generally very enthusiastic turnout, Peter.
Many thanks, Claire Shipman in Ohio, to which I suspect we will return many times in the course of the evening. Of course, the House of Representatives, all 435 members, are up today. The split in the House is currently Republicans 227, Democrats 205, 1 independent, and 2 vacancies, which were, until they were contested, 1 vacancy, I beg. 1 independent, 2 vacancies.
We have 1 call in the House of Representatives that is quite interesting.
All right, let me come back to it in a minute, Koki. Thank you very much. In many parts of the country, please stay tuned for Koki Roberts. We're going to break away to local news in other parts of the country so people can get caught up with those local races, including that 1 call in the House, of course.
From WGNO, New Orleans, this is ABC 26 News, The Votes.
Good evening again. I'm Michael Hill.
And I'm Susan Rosjan. A lawsuit to keep Louisiana's polls open until 10 tonight in Orleans Parish has been denied. So the polls officially closed at 8, and they will stay that way.
The votes cast today will decide who will become Louisiana's junior U.S. Senator, or if we're looking at a runoff. Let's check out some of the numbers right now as we take a look. Here's with 1% of the precincts reporting David Vitter, the Republican, lone Republican in this race, 56% of the vote at 21,290.
Then you see Congressman Chris John behind him with 29%.
And then Kennedy there at 12% with 4,625.
With just
votes.
1% of the precincts reporting so far. No numbers yet, apparently, for Arthur Morell in this so far. Now, Chris John's headquarters are in downtown New Orleans at the Fairmont.
That's where we find Paul Murphy looking at some of the results there. Paul, how's it feeling right now?
Michael and Susie, I tell you, the mood here amongst the Chris John camp is fairly optimistic as those early returns are just coming in. Of course, the race tonight is for the seat now held by the retiring Senator John Breaux, who endorsed Chris John early on as his hand-picked successor. Breaux expects the 7th District Congressman from his hometown of Crowley to ultimately win and make the runoff tonight. Breaux says the Democrats will unite behind Chris John.
When I ran the first time in 1986, Henson Moore, a terrific candidate, had 45% of the vote in the primary. We ended up winning in the general election. Kathleen Blanco, as we all remember, running for governor, ran second to Bobby Jindal by a pretty good margin. We now call her Governor Blanco. Anytime you have a moderate mainstream Democrat in the race in Louisiana, I think they can be successful against a highly partisan Republican.
John Breaux predicts that David Vitter maxes out tonight and finishes second on December 4th. Michael and Susie.
We will see. Thank you, Paul.
And now live at David Vitter's campaign headquarters in Kenner tonight, where I'm sure they're looking this quite a bit differently. Liz Reyes is there. Liz?
Hey, Susie, here live at the Airport Hilton, where it's a very festive atmosphere. I'm going to have the camera follow me. If you check out over here, they've got a jazz band set up, and they've been playing for quite some time right now. A lot more David Vitter supporters are trickling in, and as the early numbers come in, they are erupting with joy over the early numbers so far. In the crowd behind me here, people are keeping track of all of those numbers as they come in. And in that crowd, a lot of very familiar political faces, Republican faces we're talking about. One of them, former Governor Buddy Roemer, on his predictions for this race tonight.
I think Vitter will be 48%. I think his runoff guy will be John Kennedy. And a month from now, I think it'll be a dead heat on election night.
Well, there you got it. We're going to have to check those numbers and see how they measure up tonight. David Vitter would be the first Republican from Louisiana sent to the U.S. Senate if he wins outright tonight, or even if he wins in the runoff. So we're going to watch those numbers come in and check back with you later. That's the latest from us here live in Kenner. Susie and Michael.
All right, thanks, Liz. We will see you later. Now, candidate Arthur Morell, who is last in the race right now with just early returns, was in Algiers today shaking hands with voters. Morell literally hit the road today with an RV loaded with campaigners. He says the results of this election are in the hands of the state's young people. And tonight, Morell, his family, and supporters are waiting for results at a young person's hotel at the International House downtown.
John Kennedy also wants to succeed John Breaux in the U.S. Senate. Kennedy spent the day in New Orleans and says campaigning has been pretty good to him. Tonight, he's in Baton Rouge with his family, awaiting the results there. Kennedy has been the Louisiana State Treasurer for the last 6 years.
Be sure to stick with ABC 26 for continuing coverage of our local races and more on NOLA.com.
We'll see you back here in 30 minutes.
From ABC News election headquarters in New York, the 2004 vote, election night. Once again, Peter Jennings.
Hello again, everybody. It has been quite an evening so far. In just a moment or so, we'll be able to tell you all the things we haven't been able to accomplish so far this evening in terms of projecting elections in states where we simply do not have enough information or because it is still too close. But we can now at 9:30 Eastern Time, 6:30 in the West, make two projections in the South. ABC News now projects that President Bush has won in the state of Louisiana with the 9 electoral votes that go with that. This is one of the few southern states that was considered to be competitive. We give it to Mr. Bush with 9 electoral votes. And in Mississippi, which has 6 electoral votes, a state that has always been strongly Republican, not always been, but strongly Republican in recent years, has gone to President Bush as well. And let me just tell you, as you look at the map, here's the live update with Louisiana and Mississippi now added to Mr. Bush's column. Mr. Bush having 170 electoral votes, Mr. Kerry 112. 270, of course, is what is needed to win. That the polls, as you just look at this map, think about this. The polls are now closed in the following places where we are not able to make a call: Colorado, Florida, Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. So in 2004, George Stephanopoulos, we see being repeated what happened in 2000. This is still razor close.
The most hotly contested states are still very, very close. I mean, the campaign spent paid a lot of attention to those states. They all, for various reasons, are close, but this is, just like 2000, setting up to be a relatively long evening because we have high turnout, because we have long lines, because the outcome is close. And Peter, even after all the votes from today are counted, as you've been reminding viewers all night, we still have to deal with absentee votes, which could be counted later, and those provisional ballots, which could take days to count.
Which lets me make one quite sharp left turn to invite back in our resident historian, Michael Beschloss. Michael, I think it's only in Oregon today, where nobody is voting today, that everybody in Oregon has already voted by mail. But what's the whole history behind early voting?
Yeah, you're right. In Oregon, you can't even vote on what is for everyone else Election Day because that's already happened by mail. You know, early voting is with a big historical lineage. At the beginning of this country, as you know, there was an idea that the people who should vote should only be white male landholders. That's expanded as time went on. Obviously, African Americans, women, other groups. In recent years, the way this has happened is that there's been an effort to make it easier for people to vote, and the idea is that that way you bring in people who have not voted before. Early voting is one example of that, especially since the debacle of 2000. But oftentimes people who are for these things are not unaware of the political benefits. President Clinton, early in his term, was for something called the motor voter bill to make it easier to register when you get your driver's license. He knew that that was likely to bring in voters that might vote Democratic. Even Lyndon Johnson, 1965, the Voting Rights Act, to make it much easier for African Americans to vote. He did that for moral reasons, but Johnson was not unaware of the fact that African American voters were likely to be Democrats.
Many thanks, Michael Beschloss. It's great to have you with us. You want a sense of history in the country? He's the best. Want to go to Philadelphia now, where the principal spear carrier for Senator Kerry is Governor Ed Rendell, the governor, and is with us in Philadelphia tonight. How come Philadelphia has not been decided yet, Governor?
You mean Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania, I'm sorry.
Right. Well, I think basically it's just because the long lines in so many different polling places have caused those votes to not get in. But I think we're cautiously optimistic here. Philadelphia will vote probably 100,000 to 140,000 more votes than it voted in the Gore-Bush election. Senator Kerry's getting 80% of the votes, so that would add to his total 60 to 80,000 votes. If he comes out of Philadelphia with over 400,000 votes, he's winning the Philadelphia suburbs. I think that lead in the 5 counties would be almost insurmountable.
You made a huge effort this year for African-American turnout particularly. Has it risen to your expectations?
Oh, there's no question. The African-American turnout has been absolutely sensational. By midday in many polling places, we'd exceeded the total vote for Gore-Bush in 2000.
And what is the other part of the state? Pittsburgh, of course, works for you, and then there's that middle part of the state, that T in the whole middle of the state. Do you have any reports in there so far?
Well, the voting is strong all over the state. The Republicans did a terrific job with their organization. They had 66,000 volunteers. But the answer is when you increase the vote in the middle of the state, you may yield an extra 40 or 50,000 votes. When you increase the vote in Philadelphia and the Philadelphia suburbs, you add 200, 220,000 votes. The increase in votes have been fairly consistent, but the mother lode is in Philadelphia suburbs, and in Allegheny County in the west, which is Pittsburgh. So I think the increase in votes is going to help us carry this state fairly easily, easily enough that I hope we won't have any recounts. We won't have to deal with the provisional ballots, well, things like that.
And when it is all over and you look back on this, as you will, what do you think will be the principal issue in the state tonight?
Well, principal issue was the economy and health care. You can't separate them. There are huge issues to a state that has lost 160,000 manufacturing jobs, and a lot of pensioners have lost their health care as their companies have tanked. But I'd also say that John Kerry's performance in the debates took us really into the lead, and we've stayed there ever since.
Governor Rendell, thanks very much for the time. Governor Ed Rendell from Pennsylvania, citing the huge voter turnout by African Americans today, which we've yet to see quantified numerically, not that we don't take his word for it, but in a number of cities around the country today, Pennsylvania, also in Ohio as well, the African-American vote is at least anecdotally said to be very high. Terry Moran at the White House on the state of mind there this evening. Terry?
Peter, we got more than the state of mind here. We actually have some news, some action here. In a break with tradition and a very remarkable development, the president has brought the press up into the residence so that he can talk to the nation through the press. You can see them going in to the residence, the grand front entrance, the grand foyer of the White House there. That's the pool cameras and reporters who have been brought up to where the president is, so that he can talk. This is unusual for a candidate to come out while the votes are being counted, before the nation knows the result, to say something. Now, obviously, we'll find out what he says. But one of the things that the Bush campaign is concerned about here is that a lot of the battleground states have poll closings that are considerably later. You can talk about Iowa, which has a 10 p.m. Eastern poll closing. Go farther west, Nevada, New Mexico, even all the way out to Hawaii, where the vice president was towards the end of this campaign. I think one of the things we may be seeing here is the president saying to supporters in those states where the polls are still open, I'm still fighting. This race is far from over. It has not been called, obviously, but he wants to keep his supporters up, whatever they hear, and getting to the polls in those states.
You don't know the specific message yet. You're speculating about it, right?
I am speculating about it, indeed. But it is a very unusual development, and I'm squaring it with a lot of the reporting that I'm doing with the Bush campaign officials who are leaning on me and all of our colleagues, I can say, very heavily to say, look, there's a lot more election in this night, and I can tell you this is a campaign right now which is fighting for every vote out there, votes which have yet to be cast, votes which have been cast, absentee ballots, those provisional ballots we've been talking about. The Bush campaign is in a very combative mood right now, and I think that may be part of what we're seeing here at the White House.
Terry, let me ask you this. How heavily does the political apparatus in the Bush campaign lean on reporters when they want to get their point across?
Well, they get their point across. I think both campaigns do that. This is a campaign that Peter really played very differently when they were ahead than when they were behind. When they were ahead most of the year, it was almost as if it was on cruise control, and information would be kind of dolloped out little by little when, frankly, they saw fit. And then that first debate came, the president hit the speed bump, the race got much tighter, and for a while, the campaign got a little chippy, a little unpleasant in dealing with the press, and then settled down into this kind of fighting, combative spirit that we're seeing in spades tonight, both here at the White House and over at campaign headquarters, which is in Arlington, Virginia.
Okay, thanks very much, Terry. In a moment, we'll go to Republican National Headquarters to hear from the RNC Chairman Ed Gillespie. But I want to check in first with Dean Reynolds, who's with the Kerry campaign, to ask you, Dean, whether or not you're getting the same kind of interest from the campaign as Terry and others are getting from the RNC.
Well, this campaign is not nearly as, I guess the word is pugnacious this evening as the Bush folks are, or combative, as Terry puts it. They're all sort of laid back, feeling pretty good. You know, they see trends that perhaps we don't see. They see trends that make them smile. They see that Ohio looks pretty good for them, that, let me see what they just told me, Wisconsin and Minnesota also look pretty good. They're very pleased by what they believe is a heavy turnout in Florida. So, no, they're not very combative, but I can guarantee you they're very interested in what the president is going to say.
Okay, thanks very much, Dean Reynolds with the Kerry campaign. Now let's go to the chairman of the Republican National Committee, Ed Gillespie, who joins us as a guest tonight. Mr. Gillespie, it is a little unusual to see the president come out in the middle of a campaign evening, unorthodox. What do you think he's got in mind?
Well, I don't know. I haven't heard from the White House, Peter, so I'll watch to see, but I'm glad he's going to go out and talk a little bit about this important election. It is the most important election of my lifetime, and there's still some time left in it, and we're doing very, very well. You see the numbers out of Florida. We have exceeded our vote goals in Florida and Ohio. We're excited about the fact that very important swing counties, battleground counties that tend to be a bellwether as to how those states are going to go, are going for the president, in some cases by as many as 10 points more.
Can I just interrupt you for just a second?
Yeah.
It's very unusual for the president to go on the air on election night before the polls have closed in some states, and you actually telling us you actually haven't heard from him? Or anybody at the White House at all?
No, I haven't. I'm at the Republican Party headquarters for literally the party here at the Reagan Building, and I haven't had a chance. I've been doing, frankly, interviews with the media like you, so I defer to the White House to comment on his remarks.
So given your enthusiasm, given your general enthusiasm for your chances, why do you think it is that in Colorado, Florida, Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, no projection has been made in your favor as of yet?
Oh, well, it's early. You know, in Florida, for example, there's still a whole nother time zone, as you know, in the Panhandle, and Ohio, you know, is a close state. But when you look at the early numbers, we look at our target precinct goals, and we look at the battleground counties and how they're going. looks very good to us.
Okay, Ed, thank you very much indeed. Ed Gillespie, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, who says he's been over there at the Reagan building. Just let's hold the Bush tape for just a moment, okay, if we may, and talk to George Stephanopoulos for a second. George, how unusual is this? The polls are not closed in large parts of the country.
Say, but I don't think it's ever happened before, Peter, and I wonder what the message will be. I could imagine a few different ones. I could imagine one that simply says, hold on. This is going to be a long night. I want to make sure this goes in an orderly way.
Right.
And I think that would probably be more appropriate than a very overtly political statement from the White House at this time. I think you also have to look back at 2000. I think both campaigns, looking back at 2000, believed coming out of it that Governor Bush at the time got an advantage by acting as the victor in the days immediately following Tuesday. And I think one of the things that President Bush can remind everyone tonight is just by being in that residence, I am the president.
And a very smart thing to do if the race is particularly close at the moment and the polls are not closed in some particular places. George Will, have you got any notion of why the president has called the press in tonight and is not going to appear?
Well, both candidates, Peter, would very much like to win, not just with a plurality of the votes. Someone would like to get over 50% of the votes. 1/8 of the American electorate votes in California, which is really not a contested state this year. So therefore, the president could be thinking, I'd like to run my vote up there, even though it's not contested, because I will need in the end, if I do win, to be considered a 51% winner. Peter, we've had 18 presidents elected in this country who did not get to 50% of the vote. We've had 3 consecutive elections now in which the winner did not get to 50% of the vote. And no matter who wins, that person would feel, I think, an enhanced infusion of legitimacy if he could get over that hurdle.
Many thanks, George. Michael Beschloss.
I'll offer one possible answer to this mystery. 2000, remember election night 2000? I hate to mention early in the evening when Florida was assigned to Al Gore, but that was the point that Governor George W. Bush, in his living room in the governor's mansion, called in the press and said, I don't believe these results from Florida. This race is too close to call. Essentially, this ain't over yet. And he may essentially be reliving history tonight and trying to suggest to people that even though there may be some close calls and perhaps states may not be coming immediately in his direction, he may be trying to stiffen potential Bush voters who are still to vote.
Many thanks, Michael. Many thanks, George. Will, many thanks, George Stephanopoulos. There's no desire to keep the president off the air or Senator Kerry off the air if he decides to say something this evening. Just want to try to give some context of why an unusual event like this actually may happen, and we don't yet know precisely what he's going to say. We'll be back.
Vote 2004, Election Night. Brought to you by Chrysler. Inspiration comes standard. This ABC News special will continue in a moment. ABC News Election Night 2004 continues. Once again, Peter Jennings.
Welcome back, everybody. Let's first of all take a look at the map. This is the situation at a little before 10 o'clock Eastern Time, a little before 7 in the West. In the popular vote, you can see there, Mr. Bush changing as we look. Not a huge amount. 53% of the popular vote so far is going to Mr. Bush, 47% going to Mr. Kerry. That doesn't mean a great deal at the moment. In the electoral map, with these states already decided, but a great many more crucial states undecided. Mr. Bush has 170 electoral votes. Mr. Kerry has 112. And we may talk at some point about the complicated way and you can get to this crucial 270. George, I recall earlier, just very briefly, I think there were like 44 million computations that people made on this.
I think it was over 4 million at least.
4 million,
and about 33 that get you down to 269, 269.
Okay, and very quickly, I want to go to Kate Snow on one Senate call. Kate?
South Carolina, Peter, which we've been following very closely. This was Fritz Holling's seat. He was a Democrat. we are now able to project that Jim DeMint, the Republican, will take that seat. It is significant, of course, because that means that a seat has switched over. The Republicans right now control the Senate by a very slim majority.
Many thanks, Kate Snow, very much. Now I want to go to Washington because this tape of the president speaking to the press at the White House has just been made available. And I don't know whether it has any sound on it, but perhaps we could have another look at it now. Just re-rack it and look at it again, because this, of course, looks very much like the president and the family up in the family quarters watching the returns. And Terry Moran at the White House is with us. Terry, didn't hear the president say anything, but you know what he said.
Well, I've covered him for a few years, but I can't read his lips. But I have been told that he said, I'm going to win. I think I'm going to win, and I think we'll know tonight. I think it'll be settled tonight.
And,
so
this is basically all that we have. So we may have had a great discussion here about the possibility of the president trying to influence votes out in the West, and he didn't say it after all.
Well, he didn't say it, but it remains an unusual choice for the president to make, for his campaign to make, to put him out there on camera before the nation while the votes are being counted.
And he looks perfectly relaxed up there. George Stephanopoulos, you reckon. He looks perfectly relaxed. That's the point, right?
He's relaxed. He's confident. He's going to win. That picture is far more important than the 13 seconds of words, which he said at the time.
And there's former President Bush, Bush 41, and Mrs. Bush as well, other members of the president's family. And as I said, Terry doesn't able to read his lips. Cokie Roberts has one call to make in the House of Representatives, please, before I forget you.
One call, only interesting because it is a switch from the Democrats to the Republicans in Kentucky, and the Democrats, I think, understood that it was very, very unlikely for them to retake the House of Representatives tonight, and if they start losing seats, they certainly are not going to retake the House of Representatives. This one was a seat that's always been hard fought, year in and year out. It was held by Democrat Ken Lucas. The man who ran against him last time, Jeff Davis, has won that seat, the Republican. Interestingly, he ran against George Clooney's father. It was a celebrity in the race, Nick Clooney, a former anchorman himself, but an anchorman in the neighboring state of Ohio.
Many thanks, Cokie Roberts, on one move in the House. George, one of the things we haven't yet quite looked at is the efficiency of the get-out vote organizations, but they were legion on both sides.
Oh, no question about it. Democrats have had a traditional advantage in get-out-the-vote operations, and this year, the Kerry campaign effort, which was 3 times the size of Vice President Gore's effort 4 years ago, was supplemented by a variety of outside groups funded by organized labor and other liberal groups who invested over $100 million in get-out-the-vote operations in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, across the country. They believed that if this race were tied going into Election Day, their ground game would get them over the top.
I have been struck throughout the year at how fast the two campaigns have been able to respond to each other. No sooner is President Bush on the television there than the Kerry campaign responds. Mr. Bush is nervous, as he should be. He looks nervous. They're quite amazing the way they've gone back and forth, and there's no evidence that Senator Kerry is going to come out and say anything or even be seen tonight, but that may change now that we've had a glimpse of the president. But we are going to take another short break for local news all across the country, including the race undoubtedly involving Mr. Clooney. ABC News live coverage will continue at the top of the hour, and we'll have poll closing in 4 more states at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 o'clock in the West.
From WGNO New Orleans, this is ABC 26 News, The Votes.
Good evening, I'm Michael Hill.
And I'm Susan Roschen. Tonight, voting activists filed a lawsuit to try to keep Orleans Parish polling places open an extra 2 hours.
The lawsuit claimed problems at the polls today kept a large number of voters from casting their ballots.
But then just after 8 o'clock tonight, Civil District Judge Sidney Cates rejected the lawsuit filed by attorney Bill Quigley.
If the goal was a uniform system, then I have to say that New Orleans failed today.
And so now the counting of the votes begins. A hot race on the ballot tonight. Who will be the new criminal sheriff for Orleans Parish? The candidates you know are Warren Riley and Marlon Gusman. And Kurt Sprang is live at the Gusman headquarters in the Warehouse District. Kurt.
Well, Susan, the party is beginning to pick up here. No sign of the candidate, but I did speak with one of the men who ran against him, current Sheriff William Hunter. He says it was a very difficult decision for him to choose who to endorse in this runoff. He says he feels he did choose the right man with Marlon Gusman. And he adds that as soon as this race is over, whoever wins, he says he wants to work with them on a transition period to make sure they can adjust to the office and get up to speed. But he says he feels it will be easier to work with Marlon Gusman instead of Warren Riley because of who he endorsed in this runoff. Susan?
Thank you, Kurt.
Now we go live to Glenn Boyd, live at Warren Riley's headquarters downtown. Glenn?
Well, Michael, supporters are starting to file in right now. Warren Riley, I'm told, is at home watching the returns, and he could probably be there for a while, considering the fact that we're still hearing that folks are still in some long lines trying to vote. Usually the candidate comes in around 10 o'clock and talks to supporters and reporters and supporters, but that shouldn't be the case tonight. We could be in for a long light, but I can tell you this, the campaign feels good about this race tonight.
All right, thanks, Glenn. Thank you, Glenn.
And throughout the evening, we're going to have perspective on all of our election returns from ABC 26 political analyst Jeff Crouere.
Jeff, quickly now, you're watching some of the Senate results here as we get them in. What can you tell us so far? It looks like it's going as pretty much as planned.
Pretty much as predicted. David Vitter close to 50%. He's actually at 52 in the last number that I saw, and it's going as planned for Vitter. His best chance to win this race is to win it now.
Okay, Jeff, we'll check in with you later. Okay. And we hope you'll stay with us
throughout the evening, and log on to NOLA.com for forums and polls throughout the night.
Back at 9:25.
ABC News Special, the 2004 vote. Today, all across the country, Americans cast their vote. And tonight, it all comes down to this: election night. Now reporting from ABC News election headquarters in New York, Peter Jennings.
Good evening, everyone. Again, if you have been with us since the outset, or even if you're just joining us, you picked it up on the radio or anywhere else, you know there's a tug of war going on out there at the moment in these battleground states, which were designated, you know, quite some time before the campaign came to an end. It is just not possible to make some projections. But here we are at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, 7 o'clock in the West, and the polls have just closed in 4 more states. So let's have a look at them, beginning with the state of Iowa. This is, of course, one of the serious battleground states. Was some possibility it might be a switch to Mr. Bush. John Kerry campaigned there right up until the very end. We are not yet in a position to make a projection in Iowa. In Nevada, also a battleground state, which Mr. Bush won in 2000, but Bill Clinton had won in the previous 2 elections. We're not prepared to make any projection there. 5 electoral votes, polls just closed. In Utah, we are able to project that Mr. Bush is the winner there, and the 5 electoral votes in Utah go to Mr. Bush. It was his 3rd best showing in 2000, behind Wyoming and Idaho, so that's not a great big surprise. In Montana, which basically hasn't been contested at the presidential level this year, though it did vote for Bill Clinton back in 1992, we are not yet able to make a projection. And just a couple of other things before we go on to look at the battlegrounds generally. Let me give you a live update, if I may, on what the map looks like now. And now here is another projection from us there in Arkansas, where the polls closed an hour and a half ago. We now project that Mr. Bush is the winner. Very close up until the end. Smallest state in the South, of course. We now project that that goes to Mr. Bush. And just a couple of other little points that we've been talking about this evening in terms of turnout. Gary Langer, who is the director of the ABC News polling unit, has been looking at the exit polls and doing computations on Black American or African American turnout. He says that the black turnout in Ohio so far is the same as it was in 2000. Very interesting, given the fact that there's been a lot of anecdotal evidence throughout the day that the black turnout, particularly in the northeastern part of Ohio, is really high. Similarly, he says, to confirm the report that we got from Governor Rendell, that in Pennsylvania, the African-American vote does appear to be up significantly and nationally as well. But in Ohio, he says that so far it is showing the same as it did in 2000. George Stephanopoulos, just before I go up to Boston for an interview, does that surprise you at all?
It does.
Yeah,
it definitely does. I would have expected.
It rained up there a lot today. I'm not sure that's
it did rain up there a lot today, but one of the most intensive get out the vote efforts in the entire country was by the Democratic Party and its allies in the state of Ohio. They knew they needed a huge African-American turnout, particularly in Cleveland, but also in other cities like Toledo and Dayton and Cincinnati. And this does surprise me so far. Let's see if it bears out over the rest of the evening.
Okay, many thanks. As I said, we're going to go to Boston, but just a little bit more on the appearance, very brief appearance by the president, looking relaxed up there in the family quarters of the White House. A note from Stephanie Cutter, who is the director of communications from the Kerry campaign, very quickly say part of the overall effort to show that he, the president, has not lost. He doesn't have the votes, but he does have a picture, and Senator Kerry, I'm told, will not do a photo op, as we call it in the trade, in return, a picture opportunity. But we do have a chance now at Kerry headquarters in Boston to talk to the senator's youngest daughter, Vanessa. Vanessa, good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Tell us what you've all been doing this evening. And I'm very well, thank you. I hope you are as well.
I have been working this evening. I'm continuing to do TV and to do some radio calls, and I'm just asking every American to get out there and vote and be a part of this. There's an incredible opportunity to get a fresh start, an incredible opportunity to just take the biggest election in a long, long time into our own hands.
And who have you talked to your dad at all tonight?
I have spoken to my father. I've seen my dad. I gave him a little wink and a smile. We sort of were passing in the night because he's been working too, and I'm going to go see him shortly after this.
He did an astonishing number of satellite interviews with local affiliates around the country today. Is he relaxing as the president appears to be relaxing?
I actually don't know exactly what he's doing at this minute because I've been here working. But what I do know is that he is he's just going to continue fighting for every vote, fighting for the honor to be able to lead this country and give it the kind of leadership it deserves. I've watched him crisscross this country and really feel and see the hope that many Americans are giving him for a better future. And he takes that seriously and really wants to be a part of a good change.
Are you at all surprised, now that you've become something of a political expert in the last many months, that so many polls are closed in various parts of the country and so much of it is as yet undecided?
No, I'm not surprised. I think we're all proceeding cautiously at this point based on 2000. I think we're all looking to heal and move forward. And this is a close race. No one ever thought it was going to be any different. We've known it was going to be a close race to the end.
And your father did tell me over the weekend that he thought he was pretty sure that it was going to be resolved tonight. Do you feel the same way?
I do feel the same way. I think we are going to have our next president of the United States, at least by the early morning. And I hope we do, because I think it is time for us to move on from the wounds of 4 years ago. And I think that if every vote is counted as it should be, then we are going to have a very decisive win tonight.
Okay, very nice to have you with us. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Senator Kerry's daughter, who points out that she's at Kerry headquarters working. Both the daughters have worked very hard in this. We want to make another projection. Here's another instance of a state which closed its polls at 8 o'clock Eastern time this evening. And an hour and a half later, ABC News is in a position to project for the state of Missouri, which has sided with the winner in every election but one since 1904. We project that it is going to President Bush. A lot of heavy investment by Mr. Kerry up to a point, and then he quit. Surprise at all to you, George? No.
Not really, no. I mean, Senator Kerry had hoped early in the summer that this would be competitive, but they pretty much gave up on it in August, didn't compete there, didn't go back there, didn't put money on television.
So this will not be a surprise to the Kerry campaign, and as we look at this map here, it gives Mr. Bush 192 electoral votes, Senator Kerry 112. What's the next thing that, if you were in either campaign now, you would be really panting heavily to know?
Well, all 10 of the battleground states are still out. You'd like to see one of them fall one way or the other to give you some indication of where this thing is swinging. Again, every single vote that's up there so far is exactly the way it fell in 2000.
Let me get you to play tactician for a second. Let's go to the map for just a moment, full scale, and I'm going to do something a little bit naughty here probably. I'm going to color a state as, like Florida, yellow for the moment. And I do that only for a second. We haven't projected in it, so it's really still gray by all means. But Once Florida falls, you then begin to look at a variety of different formulas as to how this might be achieved.
Let me give you an example. Let's say Florida goes, as it did 4 years ago, to President Bush.
Right.
That narrows the options for Senator Kerry. For Senator Kerry then to get the 270 votes he needs, he would have to win, hold on to Pennsylvania, get New Hampshire, win Ohio and Michigan, and then make sure that he wins 2 of the 3 of Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. If he does that, he can pretty much assure himself the 270 votes he needs, but that's just one of many combinations, Peter.
Gary Langer, our political director, is saying, have to be careful what's reportable and what's not reportable so that we don't speculate, that there's lots of variation across the different states in terms of turnout and issues and attitudes. Again, I don't know whether that comes as a surprise, given that we have been so focused on Iraq, terrorism, and the economy. Still the big 3, without question.
Those are definitely the big 3, but you wouldn't be surprised at that because in addition to the overall, and this is still obviously a national election, in addition to the overall messages the campaigns are sending, you do have local issues in each state. You have those gay marriage referendums in Ohio and Michigan. You have Yucca Mountain in Nevada. So you're going to get these local issues which are going to skew the race depending from state by state.
Okay, I want to go to California now. Thanks, George, to talk to Tavis Smiley, who's our guest from Los Angeles tonight. Tavis, you have an advantage, a greater advantage, I think, than most people in broadcasting. You talk to a huge number of people on a daily basis about the issues on your talk radio. How much anger have you found out there in the last several months?
I think a significant amount. I tried to mention earlier tonight that I think in this election, certainly given that Iraq was, to George's point, a significant backdrop, people were voting their fears and their frustrations and their angst and their anger much more than their hopes. I think that's significant. I also think, though, that's significant and true of the African-American vote. These numbers that you mentioned earlier, Peter, of the African-American turnout around the country is significant for me. If Mr. Kerry were, in fact, to be elected president tonight or in the coming days, as it might be, Mr. Kerry is going to owe the African-American community in a very significant way. And in that regard, Mr. Bush has raised the bar for how you reward African-Americans for saving the day and showing up for you on Election Day. Mr. Bush has appointed, as you know, Dr. Rice as National Security Advisor, Colin Powell as Secretary of State. No longer can a Democrat say to the African-American community, or for that matter, the Hispanic community, with Mr. Gonzalez as White House counsel, that we can give you those traditional, as it were, departments in the cabinet, in the administration. So how does Mr. Kerry, should he win, go about the business of rewarding black folk and brown folk in this country for saving the day for him, if in fact that were to happen?
I remember when the president went to speak at the Urban League in Detroit some months ago, and he told the members of the Urban League who were there that the Democratic Party has been taking you for granted all these years. Do you think that had some traction in the African-American community?
Well, I think it was an old line, and not a line that black folk have not said themselves, quite frankly, and for that matter, the Hispanic community as well. So often, I think voters of color, communities of color, feel ignored by one party, taken for granted by the other party, which makes it all the more significant that black folk and brown folk might, in fact, should Mr. Kerry win, be that deciding vote, along, of course, with young people that made a difference in this election.
The Republicans in the course of this campaign have made the point that the president would like to have raised the percentage of African Americans who voted for him, and I think the figures were like, you know, raise it by 5 or 6% in the course of the campaign. Did you ever see any evidence that that was possible?
Absolutely. I think the president, at the end of the day, is going to raise that number. I don't think it's going to be double, as one poll indicated a few days ago, but I think he is going to raise that number, and that's significant. The Democratic Party has got to stop, in the minds of so many African Americans, taking the African American vote for granted and relying on them again today to save the vote for the Democrat Party. The Republicans had more. I saw you covering both conventions. I was at both conventions. The Republican Party had many more African Americans as delegates this time than any time before. Issues like gay marriage and abortion and other conservative issues played to African American voters this time around. So there is going to be, I think, a greater intensity for voters of color in the coming months and years.
Just one last question, Tavis, for the moment, and if it's unfair, just tell me. When you're looking for grounding in terms of political sensitivities on a night like this, who do you call?
My mama.
All right, make a call. We'll get back to you.
All right.
Okay, thanks very much, Tavis. Which brings, let's go to our political director, Mark Halpern, because he's doing all of our exit polls tonight. And I have just heard in my ear, Mark, that you can give us some real sense of what African-American voters are thinking out there this evening.
Well, I can give you a sense in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And let me say something about the African-American vote, which you mentioned earlier in Ohio. Right now, again, preliminary data. Let's talk first Pennsylvania, then we'll go back to Ohio.
Okay.
In Pennsylvania, this year, 13% of the people who voted were African-American. Compare that to 4 years ago, 7%. That was obviously a major goal of the Kerry campaign. Senator Kerry doing very well with African-American voters. 85% of those 13% voted for him. A big advantage for him in that state. And then also another group targeted not just in Pennsylvania, but nationally by John Kerry, younger voters. In Pennsylvania, again, preliminary data right now shows in 2004, 21% of the people who voted in Pennsylvania today were young voters. That's 18 to 29, whereas 4 years ago in 2000, 14%. And again, the split very favorable to Senator Kerry. Of those youngsters who voted in Pennsylvania, Senator Kerry got 62%, the president only 38%. So Senator Kerry saw an increase in Pennsylvania of young voters and did better with young voters than even Al Gore did 4 years ago. But if I could say something about Ohio, when you said, according to the exit poll, no gain, in the percentage of voters who are African American. But remember, we're assuming an overall larger turnout. So 9%, if it goes from 9%, stays at 9%, that is a larger number of African American voters that would have voted a goal of the Kerry campaign.
Very good point. And you make another good point, which we'll come back and talk about in a minute, because a lot of people in the political establishment sort of give up on young voters. Senator Kerry tried very hard for them. Not as irresponsible, George, as sometimes people say they are. We'll be right back.
Vote 2004, Election Night. Brought to you by Jeep Trail Rated Capability. Don't go off-road without it. This ABC News special will continue in a moment. This is the 2004 vote. Once again, Peter Jennings.
Welcome back, and take a quick look at our map of the electoral vote. President Bush now has 192. Senator Kerry has 112. And as you know, if you've been with us for the evening, many of you probably knew this in advance, that some of these key battleground states, like, if I can just point them out to you, like Florida, Ohio, certainly Pennsylvania, if they, when they begin to break, they break with large numbers of electoral votes. But nothing has happened there yet. Though we are able to make a projection now in the state of Montana, where the polls only closed a few moments ago. Montana, again, has not been profoundly contested at the presidential level this year, and ABC News projects that President Bush is the winner. But a large number of the significant states around the country are now not in a position that we can project them, or we're not in a position to project them. George, talk a little bit for just 1 second here about this so-called youth vote, young people.
18 to 29-year-olds were a big target of Senator Kerry ever since they got the vote. 18-year-olds in 1972. The percentage of that vote has been declining with the exception of 1992. The goal of the Kerry campaign was to get those numbers back up to the 1992 percentage, and they felt that if they did that, particularly because of the war, that these voters were breaking towards Senator Kerry, that could be the margin of victory.
Echoes of the Howard Dean campaign in the primary
Absolutely.
period. Joining us now, and I'm perfectly honest, I don't know where he is at the moment, is Senator John McCain. And he is in Phoenix, in his home state of Arizona. Good evening, Senator McCain. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Peter.
Been a nasty year, hasn't it? You must be disappointed.
Yes, it's been a nasty year, but I hope that tomorrow morning sometime when we're clear who the winner is, that we start a process of reconciliation so that we'll all work together. And by the way, I'm encouraged that what apparently President Bush is succeeding in Florida. I think it's very important.
Everybody else I've talked to tonight is somewhat pessimistic about the possibility of reconciliation, especially in the body to which you belong, the Senate.
Well, Peter, look, we realize that it takes 60 votes to do business in the Senate without the other party, and so we're going to have to. And led by President Bush, I'm sure that he's got a very busy agenda for his second term, and I think that one of the first things he's going to do is reach out to the Democrats, and not just with a couple of cabinet appointments, but with some specific plans for working together, the way that he worked with Ted Kennedy on the No Child Left Behind Act.
That is a matter of huge speculation you just raised, whether or not, if President Bush is reelected, he will win, as they say, govern more towards the center, or whether he will continue, as he has for these last 4 years, to appeal largely to his conservative base. What do you really think?
I really think that every president in his second term has wanted to have a legacy. I think that means working together with the other side on national security issues as well as domestic issues. So I'm confident that he'll do that.
Talk a little bit about Arizona, because we're about to face the results in Arizona. What, as you travel around the state, is there one issue which is absolutely dominant?
Yes, there is in Arizona, and this may surprise you a little, but probably won't actually. Immigration. Immigration reform is the big issue here. We have terrific problems with lawlessness, with destruction of property, with strains on our health care, with 200 and some people dying in the desert in the last year. It's probably the transcendent issue, and the second one is water.
You have a proposition on the ballot in Arizona that should anyone applying for public health benefits has to prove that they're a citizen. How divisive has that been in the state of Arizona this year?
It's been very divisive, and by the way, it just says public benefits, which some of us are concerned that it might mean public libraries or parks or other public facilities. We understand the frustration that the people of this state feel. They're understandably frustrated, but I and the other elected leaders of this state don't feel it's the right answer. In fact, we think it's very much the wrong answer.
A final question, if I may, Senator, and it's very nice to you. Do you often or ever feel used by the Bush campaign this year? You have not always been bosom buddies by any means.
Peter, I support the president strongly. I enjoyed campaigning with him, and I think the transcendent issue of this campaign was the war on terror, and I think he was best qualified. That does not detract from the fact that I'm a good friend of John Kerry's.
Many thanks. Nice to see you, Senator McCain.
Peter.
Senator John McCain of Arizona, as he points out, a good friend of John Kerry's, and maybe a good friend of the president would be stretching it. As he didn't say it, perhaps I shouldn't say it, but you will recall that in a previous year, 2000, John McCain got gone over by the Bush campaign in ways that were stunning to the senator, and he has been one of the leading lights campaigning for the president in this campaign today, for which the president is undoubtedly grateful. We're going to break for your local news in some parts of the country now, though ABC News will, of course, continue at the national level.
From WGNO New Orleans, this is ABC 26 News, The Votes.
Good evening. I'm Susan Resgen.
And Michael Hill. Louisiana's polls have closed and the votes already have poured in. They're counting them down.
So let's take a look now at the latest numbers that we have in the U.S. Senate race. With 49% of the precincts reporting, Vitter has crossed that critical 50% mark. 54% of the vote, again, with just 49% of the precincts reporting.
That means about half the votes still to be counted there. John, now we see with Chris John with 29% or 240,000 votes.
And John Kennedy, state treasurer, with 13%. Arthur Morell out of the race at this point. Liz Reyes is at the Vitter camp in Kenner tonight, out at the Airport Hilton.
Liz, are supporters there hopeful after looking at some of these numbers?
Well, they're feeling pretty good. They're very optimistic, and they've been cheering nonstop as these numbers come in. Obviously, they're hoping for that 50.1%. They're hoping this won't be a race decided in the runoff. But if it is a race that has to be decided December 4th, he's going to have to win a lot of Democratic voters, a lot of independents. And joining us now is Shanice Scott. She is a registered Republican with LSU, and she tells us that Vitter will probably not have too difficult a time trying to win some young black votes because many of them are either independent or they're registered Republicans. And why is that?
Well, a lot of the reasons why is because a lot of young African Americans aren't identifying themselves with the civil rights movement like their grandfathers and their fathers are. Now they're actually looking at the Republican Party issue by issue, especially when it comes to economic development, tax breaks. Like, for example, the Republican Party actually gave tax cuts to small businesses, and a lot of young African Americans are going to college more. They're looking for prosperity issues here, and as a result of that, you know, they're going to be looking at the Republican Party a lot closer. I mean, as opposed to having the Democrat stronghold that they had before.
Well, thank you very much. It'll be interesting to see what happens at the end of the night. Thank you for joining us, Shanice Scott. We're expecting David Vitter to greet his supporters here tonight and speak to them around 10 o'clock. Of course, we'll bring that to you as soon as it happens. So that's the latest from us here, and we're keeping a close watch on those numbers. Michael and Susan.
Interesting perspective. Thank you, Liz. Now, in the Orleans Parish criminal sheriff's race, we have some numbers there as well. Let's put them up.
This is the close race, the heated race between Marlon Gussman and Warren Riley, with just 22% of the precincts reporting this race. Marlon Gussman, the city councilman, is leading Deputy Police Chief Warren Riley.
In the Senate 3 congressional races, or the state 3 congressional races there, we'll see with 57% of the precincts reporting, Bobby Jindal with 78% of the vote.
Expected to easily win this race. He's raised $2 million. He was giving some of the money away to other Republican candidates. He was so far ahead.
And in the 2nd congressional district, the incumbent Jefferson with 65% of the vote, and Schwartz there with 35% of the vote. And this is only those 6% of the precincts reporting in that race.
And in the 3rd congressional district, it's Charlie Melanson, Billy Tozan III, and Craig Romero. Really close, only separated by a few percentage points, with 51% of the precincts reporting. So this one could definitely go to a runoff. In the race for Public Service Commissioner, real quickly, we'll give you that board if we've got it. There you see Boissiere and Fields, too close to call, with only 28% of the precincts reporting.
Stick around for more election coverage in our 10 o'clock newscast.
Until then, you can log on to NOLA.com. We'll see you in 30 minutes.
Candidate tonight. It looks great, and they're being entertained at Copley Plaza in Boston. That's the Kerry crowd in Copley Plaza, where it doesn't look to be particularly cold. I don't know exactly what the temperature is, but they've had a good crowd there. Senator Kerry's had some astonishing crowds. Of course, so has President Bush. Probably the largest crowd that I think Senator Kerry had in the course of the campaign was when Bruce Springsteen in Madison, Wisconsin, showed up to play with him. And here is the Ronald Reagan Building in Washington, D.C., where entertainment is also the order of the evening so far, and a large crowd there, which the Bush administration, or should I say the Bush campaign, to be more precise, has been describing as a victory party since early in the evening. But it's not quite in the cards for anybody. So let's go to the map just to show you how much reason there may be in both of these campaigns to have a measure of tension at the moment. In Florida, and I'm just going to, don't be misled by this yellow I'm putting in here. This is just a highlight. In Florida, we are still not able to make a projection. Similarly, we are not able to make a projection in Ohio at the moment. We are not able to make a projection in Pennsylvania because there is not yet enough information. And in New Hampshire, right there, beg your pardon, right there, it is too close to actually project. It is too close to project the vote in New Hampshire. And so in all of these states, along with others as well, as long as with many other of the key battleground states, this is an election which is simply some distance from being resolved. But take a look at the popular vote in these respective states at the moment, because 2000, remember, one person won the popular vote, one person won the electoral vote. In other there's been a lot of speculation this year that maybe President Bush could win the popular vote and John Kerry might win the electoral vote. But that's what it looks like at the moment. Mr. Bush has 52% of the popular vote, with 85% of the precincts reporting. Ohio, 35% of the precincts reporting. Remember, in many of these states, there are these provisional ballots, there are absentee ballots, the military ballots in some cases. But with 35% of the precincts reporting, Mr. Bush has 52% of the popular vote, and Mr. Kerry has 48%. Pennsylvania, 53% of the precincts reporting now, 40% of that popular vote going to Mr. Bush, and Mr. Kerry getting 60%. Again, speaking, I think, to the very, very large turnout of black voters in both Philadelphia and to some extent in Pittsburgh, but a very big difference in there. But all of the others are showing fairly close. New Hampshire, 48% of the precincts reporting 50% for Mr. Bush and 50% for Mr. Kerry. We do not call it a battleground state for nothing. Now, There's our update map. 196 electoral votes for Mr. Bush and 112 for Mr. Kerry. And just a little things. The Secretary of State in Minnesota said a short while ago at a press conference that Minnesota is definitely over 70% in terms of turnout and could reach a record 83%, but it was too early to tell. Minnesota sometimes called the, let me show it to you there on the map just a second, sometimes called the civic state. But the turnout there, according to the Secretary of State tonight, way up over 70%, and he believes it may go to 83%, but no way we're going to call it. And the real world, or let me put it this way, the other real world intrudes tonight, just moved on our wires here from our staff in Baghdad that close air support missions are going on in Fallujah tonight. A lot of talk in the last couple of weeks about whether or not the U.S. and the Iraqis are about to begin a major offensive in Fallujah. Close air support going on against a city from which, as of a couple of days ago, a very large percentage of the civilian population had already fled. Ralph Nader. Ah, yes. Ralph Nader is currently speaking about his election fortunes this year. If you've looked at any of the polls in the last few months, you know they've certainly changed from 4 years ago, but boy, was he a worry to the Democrats. Here's a little bit of what he is saying.
Thank you very much, Teresa, those very cogent words, and all of you for coming. The Nader Camejo campaign represents the future. There's no doubt about that. There's no way the American people are going to stand indefinitely for being told by the commercial health industry that if they don't have enough money, they're going to get sick or stay sicker. If they don't pay, they die. And 18,000 of them die every year, according to the Institute of Medicine. There's no way the American people, 47 million workers, are going to work full-time for a pittance, not a living wage. They can't support their families. There's no way the American people are going to let their country be taken over by global corporations who have no allegiance to our country anymore, or communities, or workers, other than to abandon them or to control them as they see fit. There's no way that the American people are going to allow their children to be commercialized out from under parental authority. There's no way that the trends that are deteriorating our country are going to be tolerated with impunity. The poor will be heard from someday in our country. The Republican Democratic campaigns, they don't represent the future. They represent the past. They're taking our country backward into the future. They take our country backward into the future when every year there are more people in poverty, more children going to bed hungry at night. They take our country backwards in the future when the corruption of money breaks new records in turning cash against votes. They take our country back in the future.
Ralph Nader speaking in Washington on the subject that has been his principal complaint about the two principal parties this year, that they were both supping, as he would say, at the corrupt trough, and both of them, what's the right, George? Bound, George, to corporate interests in America and to special interests in America. Didn't do nearly as well this year.
No.
It made some Democrats absolutely furious. Had many Republicans in various parts of the country working to get him on the ballot in the hope that he would hurt Mr. Kerry.
Made some of his supporters from last time absolutely furious that he was running again. And he followed in a path of a lot of third-party candidates. Look what happened to Ross Perot from 1992 to 1996. His support went from about 18% of the vote in 1992 to less than half that in 1996. It appears, from the returns we've seen so far, that the exact same thing happened to Ralph Nader. He got between 2 and 3% of the vote in 2000. It's now down around 1%, maybe even below that by the end of the night.
Okay, George, many thanks indeed. Now I want to go to Washington, where we are joined this evening by two guests who have, among their deepest interests, America's campaign or war against terrorism. On the left is Dick Clark in the Washington Bureau. He's an ABC News consultant and author of a book Against All Enemies, and worked as the chief of anti-terrorism for both Democrat and Republicans. And on the right, Richard Pearl, currently a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, the former head of the Defense Policy Board. If I could ask you both, starting with you, Mr. Clark, what you think, what you think, both of you, about all of the exchange of accusations in this campaign about who would do better in the war against terrorism. Mr. Clark.
Well, I think the president, whoever he is, has an advantage when he says he's defending the country against an imminent threat. And there's a large portion of the country that's going to believe him that there's an imminent threat and believe him that he's doing a good job about it. And he has all of the institution of the presidency behind him and all of the advantages that brings. So I'm not surprised that in the exit polling tonight, the majority of people who voted primarily on the issue of terrorism voted with the president. But there's a substantial group that didn't. And that's where terrorism and the war in Iraq get conflated. The president tries to conflate them. Senator Kerry tries to separate them. But for a substantial number of people voting for Senator Kerry, it was because of the war in Iraq.
Mr. Pearl.
Look, I believe that the president on September 11, 2001, took the country in a new and necessary direction when he said we would not distinguish between the specific terrorists who had carried out those attacks and the states that harbor them. Until then, no president, no administration had held accountable the states that offered sanctuary, support, facilities to terrorists, which enabled them to grow and prosper and plan and organize. In taking that action, the president has put the terrorists on the defensive. It's very interesting that Osama bin Laden is reduced to hurling videotapes because he is no longer capable of hurling bombs.
Mr. Pearl, you're a thoughtful man with a wide knowledge on this subject. It is also said, and it's certainly been said by the Democrats in this campaign, that the president's decision to go to war in Iraq has created of Iraq a new terrorism center, which the United States is now having to contend with in Iraq, but will one day have to contend with in other countries.
Well, I think the terrorism that we're seeing in Iraq consists of two different strains. One are the terrorists who were close to Saddam's regime. And they have no future in a free Iraq. They know that. They have no ideology. They have no larger purpose. I think they will remain in Iraq. But there are also jihadists, holy warriors, who want to destroy the United States, and they have like a magnet, been drawn to Iraq, and I would frankly rather fight them there than fight them here.
Mr. Clark.
Well, we'd all rather fight them there, Richard, than fight them here, but we don't get to make that choice. The fact that we happen to have sent 140,000 American targets to Iraq doesn't preclude terrorists from coming here, and that's why we're on Code Orange here in Washington tonight, Code Orange in New York, and also because, after all, Al-Qaeda still exists. You know, the Osama bin Laden videotape was somewhat of a Halloween prank, I think, but it does actually make an interesting point, perhaps 2 points. One, that he's still alive 3 years after 9/11, and two, that I believe he was trying to influence the election and trying to influence it in favor of Bush. By attacking Bush in the videotape, I think he knew that people's reaction would be, well, if he's against Bush, I must be for Bush.
I want to thank you both. I realize it's been brief and it merits a much longer discussion. Mr. Clark and Mr. Pearl, thanks very much for brief observations on terrorism and the political campaign. The remarks Mr. Clark has just made, Mr. Pearl, I think, might have argued with, but it's certainly been true that in this campaign you could hear an argument that Osama bin Laden was out there campaigning for Mr. Bush, and you heard a similar argument made by others that he was out there actually campaigning for Senator Kerry. Our coverage will continue in just a moment. I hope you'll stay with us.
Vote 2004, Election Night. Brought to you by Jeep Trail Rated Capability. Don't go off-road without it. This ABC News special will continue in a moment. This is the 2004 vote. once again from ABC News Election Headquarters, Peter Jennings.
Welcome back to our coverage. Take a look at the map. 270 electoral votes needed to win. Can't say it enough times. The candidates eat, dream about it, breathe about it. Mr. Bush has 196. Mr. Kerry has 112. There are no surprises of any significance. There are no surprises, period, on this map tonight. Just changed slightly again there, but not in any significant way. Mr. Bush and Mr. Kerry still not found a path tonight, which is going to be a satisfactory voyage for either one of them to the 270. We'll come and discuss that in just a moment. But ABC's Kate Snow, who's been keeping her eye on the Senate results, has a couple of calls to make. Kate?
Couple of calls. In Iowa, Chuck Grassley's opponent has actually put his campaign for sale on eBay. That's how little opposition he had. He is the projected winner in that race. In Nevada, Harry Reid, we project, will keep his seat and serve a fourth term and probably keep the minority whip title. In Utah, Robert Bennett will retain that seat, we project, for the Republicans. In Pennsylvania, we can now project that Arlen Specter, the Republican, will win that seat. And South Dakota, we just want to remind you, this is an incredibly tight race. Tom Daschle, the Democratic leader, fighting against John Thune, a former representative in the House. Not enough information yet to call that, but we're watching it very closely. Kentucky, we are also watching very closely. Take a look at the numbers now. Senator Bunning trying to defend himself against a challenge. I guess we don't have those numbers right now, but I can tell you it's about 50-50. It is just neck and neck. And just quickly, Peter, wanted to show people the makeup of the Senate to remind us all why this is so important. Right now, Republicans have control of the Senate, 51 to 48 Democrats plus one independent who votes with them, so it's basically 51 to 49. Tonight, we had 34 seats up for grabs. Most of them are incumbents who will win. 9 of them were real toss-ups, Peter. And the Democrats really had to win almost all of those races in order to try to take the majority. In fact, we are now down to a point in the evening where we have called enough races that there are only 12 seats, that middle pie piece there, that are still outstanding. And you can sort of tell from this graph here, Peter, the Democrats would have to win, of those 12, they would have to win 11 of the races that are still up for grabs tonight in order to take control definitively of the Senate. That is incredibly unlikely.
Many thanks, Kate. A compliment, by the way. Our graphics machine went down there for just a second, but our graphics people have done a magnificent job in helping us make better sense of what is going on. You know that earlier on, if you've been with us for a while, that we projected that Barack Obama had won the Senate race in Illinois for the Democrats and is currently speaking. So let's check in.
We believed the possibility in a government that was just as decent as the American people are. And we knew that despite the misinformation, despite the bitterness, despite the partisan politics, that when you talk to people, those common values would come out, that the innate instincts of the American people would surface if we could speak to them, if we could connect to them, if we could talk to them directly.
ABC News projects that the Republicans are going to retain control of the House of the Representatives. That may be the easiest projection that we have made all night. And the power of incumbency in politics generally, but in the House of Representatives, is enormous, with well over 90% of incumbents, whatever they may be, believing with some considerable justification, all the access they have to money and the establishment, that they will be returned and hold their seats, and that is pretty much the way it has gone tonight. Cookie Roberts, you wanted to make a comment about Barack Obama. He was the star, of course, of the Democratic Party convention.
Indeed, Peter, and he will go to the Senate as the only African American in the Senate, only the third since Reconstruction. And that's significant not only because it's important to try to reflect the American populace in the Senate, but also because we've learned in watching legislation over the years that it makes a difference who the individuals are who are there and what particular interests and experiences they bring to the table when they are debating and putting forward legislation in the Senate.
Many thanks, Cookie. I want to check in very quickly on Capitol Hill with Linda Douglas, who's going to cover it, Barack Obama, when he gets there to the Senate. How will he be received, Linda?
Well, I think he's going to be received by the Democrats as a conquering hero. You know, the Democrats, when they talk about who's going to run for president at any point in the future, there's always this discussion about whether the bench is very deep. Barack Obama is certainly seen as a very charismatic, articulate young man, and of course, he's finally going to, again, diversify the Senate. But Peter, I want to remind everybody of one very important moment that took place 4 years ago, having to do with the absence of any minorities in the Senate. Remember, the Black Caucus, the Black House members, wanted to challenge the certification of President Bush's election. The Supreme Court had decided that the president had won. It went to the Congress for its certification. Vice President Gore was presiding. The Black Caucus got up and pleaded for one senator to sign the petition to challenge that certification. There were no minorities in the Senate, and all of the senators sat there looking at their hands. Had there been a Barack Obama in the Senate, that might have had a different outcome.
It is a piece. It is a memory recorded certainly at the time and in everybody's political archive. Thanks, Linda, very much. Linda Douglas on Capitol Hill. Our coverage will continue in just 1 minute.
This ABC News special, Vote 2004 Election Night, will continue in a moment. This is the 2004 vote. Once again, Peter Jennings.
Welcome back to our coverage. As you know, the country is just sort of generally struggling with the closeness of this race in many of the big battleground states. And in about 3 or 4 minutes from now, 5 more states are going to close. Polls are going to close in 5 more states. That's 11 o'clock in the east, 8 o'clock in the west, which will lead us to all sorts of discussion about the path to victory. But as something of a prelude to that, I want to ask ABC's George Will. George, talk just for a moment, if you would, about the fascination with these 3 states in the Midwest.
Well, we're fascinated in them because the candidates, until the very last moment, were spending an inordinate amount of time up there. There are 3 states in the same region, but quite different. Minnesota, of course, was the only state in 1984 that did not go for Reagan. It went for its native son, Walter Mondale. And Minnesota has been a great source of senior Democratic luminaries, Walter Mondale, Gene McCarthy, and of course, Vice President and Senator Hubert Humphrey. Next door in Wisconsin, they have a strong, varied populist tradition, from Robert La Follette on the left to Bill Proxmire sort of in the middle to Joseph McCarthy, a kind of right-wing populism. And then you go down to Iowa, where all this marathon started, Peter, 10 months ago. And Iowa has, because of interesting immigration patterns from Northern Europe and the German Lutherans and all the rest, Iowa has a very strong pacifist anti-war tradition, all of which will play out in the next hour.
Many thanks. A great way to set us up for the next hour. Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin, 3 states in the Midwest. Huge battlegrounds, have been since from the outset. Our coverage will continue to discuss that and all the other matters before the country tonight. We're going to break away now in some parts of the country for local news, especially here in the East Coast where it's 11 o'clock, and in other parts of the country in different time zones just to get updated. But I hope you'll stay with us. 5 more states about to be called on the hour.
From WGNO New Orleans, this is ABC 26 News, The Votes.
Good evening, I'm Michael Hill.
And I'm Susan Rosgen. Your complete local election coverage starts right now on ABC 26. First up, the race for U.S. Senate, and here are the latest numbers with 73% of the precincts reporting.
Mr. Vitter there with 53% of the vote, and Chris John with 30%, and John Kennedy way behind the other Democrat in this race with 13%. Again, just 73% of the precincts reporting.
So if this keeps up, Vitter could win the race outright and save himself a runoff. Liz Reyes is live at David Vitter headquarters at the Airport Hilton on Airline Drive. Liz.
Hey, Michael and Susan, let me tell you, the folks in this room here at the Airport Hilton are euphoric tonight. As these new numbers in the U.S. Senate race continue to pour in, they continue to cheer and erupt. Initially, we were told that David Vitter would address the crowd at 10 o'clock tonight, but now, after looking at these numbers, it looks as though they're going to wait a little while longer to see if he possibly could win this outright. You know, earlier today, we spoke to Vitter and later on in the day to his campaign folks, and they were saying, look, most likely this is going to be a runoff. But based on what you saw with those numbers, he could pull this off tonight, and I think that's what they're waiting on right now before he addresses his supporters. And let me tell you, if he pulls this off tonight and he wins this race and he becomes the next U.S. Senator to replace John Breaux, we're talking history here. This hasn't been done since Reconstruction. I'm talking about a Louisiana Republican being sent to the U.S. Senate. So we're keeping watch. As soon as David Vitter enters this room here, we're going to bring it to you live. For now, that's the latest from us here live in Kenner at the Airport Hilton at the David Vitter campaign headquarters. Susie and Mike.
All right, thanks, Liz. But we want to point out to our viewers tonight that there are no results in yet from Orleans Parish, so that could certainly affect this race as well.
And that certainly would concern Chris John, who's the leading Democrat in this race. Our Paul Murphy is with Chris John at his headquarters at the Fairmont Hotel on Canal Street. Paul.
Well, Michael, the Chris John people aren't ready to concede this race just yet. Although the people here in the Grand Ballroom are still cautiously optimistic, you could say that they are sort of as nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. But earlier we shot some video of Chris John upstairs here at the Fairmont, watching the election returns come in with his mother, brother, and sister, and his wife Peyton and her family. The congressman still expects to make the runoff, although it's not looking that great with about 73% of the vote in at this point. He expects to be in that runoff against Republican David Vitter. He's also predicting that the final numbers tonight will exceed those in recent polls leading up to the election.
When you look at the amount of people that are voting, and frankly, the new people that have registered to vote, you know, the pollsters poll chronic voters. I think you're going to see a whole new wave of new voters out there that really we have gone after, we have really worked with, and I think that it's going to work out very well for me because of the operation that we had where we touched a lot of people.
As you can see behind me, they are getting ready for Chris John to come down here to address his supporters. Again, still holding on to hope that he will make it on the runoff and David Vitter will not make it in on the first ballot, although everybody here seems to be in agreement that David Vitter's best chance of earning this Senate seat will be on the first ballot. Michael?
Paul, before you go, isn't it a little bit early for him to come out and speak if we haven't heard the results yet from Orleans Parish? We're talking about a lot of Democrats in Orleans Parish.
You're right, Michael. In fact, I was just talking to Oliver Thomas, the city council president this year, who says that that's what makes them optimistic that Chris John will make the runoff, that a lot of the vote here in New Orleans, which is heavily Democratic, is not in yet. I'm told that Chris John is coming up to the podium right
you
now.
Can welcome your senator
being
better
introduced
than that.
by Oliver Thomas. Also on the stage, John Breaux, the sitting senior senator.
You know, we don't
Let's hear what they have to say up at the podium.
We don't want anybody to be too alone because we still have several more precincts to go. And the lady that I'm going to introduce, she knows what it's like to come out of a primary and win a close election. And that is the person who will be the new senior senator from Louisiana, Mary Landrieu.
Thank you, Louisiana. Thank you for voting. We've had voters come out north and south and east and west. We've had Democrats come out and vote and Republicans and independents. And we have a great election all across America tonight. We have a great presidential race underway.
Okay, we have Senator Mary Landrieu there.
Our political analyst Jeff Cruere is here to talk about some of these numbers in this Senate race. Jeff?
Your thoughts on this one? What happened to Chris John?
Well, it didn't look like those Democrats were too happy, did it? It does look like he is not doing as well as some expected.
The real surprise, John Kennedy is doing very poorly. And John Kennedy had the endorsement of Bill Jefferson and many of the key African-American leaders. You had expected a much better turnout from John Kennedy. But the thing about David Vitter, I think, which was key, he had a united Republican Party. He had a bounce from President Bush, because President Bush won this state very nicely. And then the Democrats were the ones sort of fighting amongst themselves. And they didn't really focus on David Vitter until toward the end. And by that time, he was already near 50%. And as Liz said, we're close to seeing history in the making here. Now, we've got to figure out where these last numbers are coming in from, Orleans or other parishes, or maybe Chris John's congressional district. But David Vitter needs to be commended for running a very, very strong race.
But there's still a lot to be told, though, if we haven't heard election results from Orleans Parish. Is that right?
Exactly, exactly. And we'll have to see where some of these other precincts are as well. Because Chris John does have a congressional district, which is going to be strong for him. We want to see if those numbers are in as well.
Did it not help John enough to have Senator Mary Landrieu and John Breaux himself say, this is the guy I want to have in my seat?
You know, I saw John Breaux doing more in the governor's race than I saw in this race. Surprisingly, I don't know if Chris John didn't have the money to use John Breaux or whether John Breaux was busy with something else, but I didn't really see him as active in this race as I would have thought. And also, of course, you know, he had Bill Clinton and others trying to help out. But again, maybe it was just the fact that David Vitter had a lot more money than both Chris John and John Kennedy, a united Republican Party, and the President Bush factor also makes this the best time for David Vitter to win this. He doesn't want to have to go to a December runoff. Republicans usually don't win those here in Louisiana.
We're still waiting for Chris John to talk, but it seems as if some of the heavyweight Democrats in the state came on Chris John's belatedly. Let's go to Chris John right now and listen to what he has to say with Paul Murphy there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hey, Bill. Thank you very much. Guys, thank you very much. Thank you for such an enthusiastic crowd and the kind of support that we have across the state. Do we have a great team or what here for this Senate race? I tell you, we've put together the team that looks just like Louisiana, from north to south, east to west, black and white, all across this state, to say to the people of Louisiana, we want a senator that's going to be independent, that's going to be a person that's not going to follow his party 99.8% of the times. Guys, we're going to be here a while tonight. We're going to be here a while tonight, but I guarantee you that when the morning comes, that there is no doubt in my mind this race is going to be very clear. That there's going to be two people in this race. Just two people left in this race, and we're going to work hard to keep Louisiana's Senate seat for Louisiana's and not Washington party bosses and puppets.
So there you have it, Chris John saying, I'm still in the race, I'm not leaving yet.
Exactly. And Jeff, I mean, again, we're waiting for Orleans Parish numbers to come in and from Chris John's district as well. And as we heard him say, it's going to be a long night.
Right. He sounded confident there, and maybe he has some figures that show that he is going to make a runoff. But, you know, he mentioned that puppet sort of theme. That's one he sort of latched onto at the end of the race. If he would have started that a little bit earlier, I think it would have been more effective in bringing down David Vitter's numbers.
Well, it had some more traction.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, speaking of numbers, let's go on now to the race for Orleans criminal sheriff, another hot one we all know, with City Councilman Marlon Gusman and Deputy Police Chief Warren Riley. This one got really hot early and stayed hot throughout this election. In the primary, Gusman was ahead by 4 points, but we want to find out how it's going to come out tonight.
And not just hot, but nasty, too. Some real nasty campaigning in the last couple of weeks, even on the weekend here. Let's go to Kurt Sprang now. Before we do that, let's look at some of the precinct numbers. This is 75% of the precincts reporting, and there you see some of the numbers.
How close it is right now. We have Kurt Sprang live at Marlon Gusman's headquarters tonight, and we've also got Glenn Boyd live at Warren Riley's headquarters. Let's start with you, Kurt. Kurt?
All right, good evening, everyone. I am told that Marlon Gusman is now in the hotel here in the Warehouse District. However, I'm told he's going to go up to a room here and watch returns, and as soon as he has a better idea of how this race is going to end, then he will come back downstairs here to the ballroom and address his supporters here. One person who is here, who I have spoken with, William Hunter, the current sheriff and former opponent of Marlin Gusman in this race. And of course, as you remember, he decided to endorse Marlin Gusman over Warren Riley. He says it was a very difficult decision for him, and he is cautiously optimistic that Mr. Gusman will win this race. I spoke with him. He says whoever wins this race, he will work with that person for a smooth transition.
I just want to make sure that whoever gets in understands the complexities of the sheriff's office and the fact that it's a full-time, 24/7 job, and that there's a lot of things about the office that require a lot of attention on a consistent basis.
Now, we probably have almost 200 people here. They're certainly encouraged by the early numbers in this race, and as soon as Marlin Gusman comes down to speak with them, we will bring it to you. Susan, Michael?
All right, thanks, Kurt. We'll see you then.
And let's turn our focus now to Glenn Boyd live at Warren Riley headquarters. Glenn?
Hey, Mike, how you doing, man? I tell you what, this has been a long night so far. Warren Riley, we know, is in the building, but we're told that he's going to come down maybe about 10:15 or 10:20 or so. In fact, I got the campaign manager with me right now, Eugene Green. 53-47 the numbers right now. How confident you are tonight that you could possibly pull this out?
Well, I'm just very confident that as the votes come in, that we'll be trending in the direction of Riley. I mean, bottom line is that Warren Riley is extremely qualified for this job, and he's run a great campaign. He's let people know his positions relative to crime prevention and also relative to law enforcement. And I just trust that at the end of the evening that Warren Riley will be our next Orleans Parish criminal sheriff.
I know he's in the building. What time can we expect him to come down?
He's in the building. He'll come down. You know, in some places, I think people just finished voting not tremendously long ago. So the bottom line is that he'll come down about 10:20 or 10:25 or something like that.
Now, listen to Susie earlier. She said that
I just want to make sure. We just want to make sure that all of the all of the votes are in before he comes down.
Also, listen to Susie not too long ago. She said that someone filed a lawsuit. The NAACP filed a lawsuit earlier trying to get the polls to stay open to about 10 o'clock. Mr. Riley had problems voting as well this morning, I understand.
Mr. Riley had problems voting this morning. He went to his precinct, and unfortunately the machine wasn't working. He did go back and, of course, vote later on. I don't know the particulars or the merits of the lawsuit relative to keeping the polls open, but I do understand that it was rejected by a judge, so it's moot.
Okay, Eugene Green, campaign manager for Warren Riley.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay. Again, 53-47 right now. I think we're going to be up a while because some of these votes are coming in real late. And the Riley campaign feeling confident that they will win this thing tonight. So we'll wait and see. Susie, Mike?
Or maybe in the morning.
I hope that.
Thanks, Glenn. Once again, our political analyst, Jeff Carrera, is here.
You know, interestingly, Eugene Green sounded a lot more confident earlier in the evening.
He did.
And I'll tell you, you know, the Boston Red Sox won the World Series after 86 years and reversed the curse. My question tonight, could Mayor Nagin reverse the curse and get one of his candidates that he endorsed elected? And if these numbers hold up, no.
Let me ask you this. When you look at the campaigning in this race, and especially the last 2 or 3 weeks, regardless of who wins, can these men shake hands and become friends or work together if both are elected officials?
Well, it's interesting that if, of course, Warren Riley wins, and Marlin Gusman's going to still be on the city council and still be an elected official that he has to deal with. But if Marlin Gusman wins, and Warren Riley goes back to, I guess, PD. So it'll be interesting to see if this holds up. But big news for Marlin Gusman so far.
All right, thank you, Jeff. And we will be back with more after this.
You're watching ABC 26 News, named Louisiana's best newscast by the Associated Press.
Welcome back. A few minutes ago, the Associated Press said that predicted John Kerry would win Pennsylvania and its 21 electoral votes, and that's significant because this is one of the key big battleground states in the presidential race.
Now, Louisiana is not a battleground state, but our 9 electoral college votes went early to President Bush. There are the numbers that you see: 58% for Bush, 40% for Kerry, and nothing left over for the also-rans, with 86% of the precincts reporting.
Dawn Olson reports from President Bush's local headquarters.
Susan, Michael, it's really 2 parties in one for the Republicans here in Metairie. One is giddy over the outright win for Congress for Bobby Jindal, going to Washington without a runoff. The other, people nervously fingernail biting as they are watching the presidential race.
I'm obviously a supporter of the president. I hope President Bush does very well. He looks like he's doing well. Whoever wins will be my commander-in-chief, will be my president. I look forward to working with whoever's declared the victor. Again, I hope it's the president, but if it is Senator Kerry, I look forward to working with him on behalf of Louisiana.
Jindal says he's already talked to some of the other freshman congressmen and women, planning what he'll do in Washington. Susan, Michael?
All right, thank you.
And Kerry supporters were hoping that a last-minute push in the New Orleans area might help the state's Democratic vote. Tonight, they're watching the numbers and hoping for a national success.
Meredith Mendez reports from Senator Kerry's local campaign party.
Michael, Susan, the national Kerry campaign pulled out of Louisiana a long time ago, but Democratic supporters here didn't give up the battle locally. Supporters are watching the numbers on the internet tonight and on TVs around this party. Kerry supporters spent the day getting out the last-minute push on the streets and with a phone bank. And while Bush is leading Louisiana, people here are encouraged by the national numbers.
I do think Senator Kerry is winning across the country, and that's the cause, even though we aren't taking the state here, for us to really celebrate tonight, because at the end of the day, we're concerned about who wins the presidency, and I believe he's going to do it.
Kerry campaign workers say even without the national support, they are proud of their local work, and they feel they did get people out to the polls, which was their ultimate goal. Michael, Susan.
Meredith Mendez with the Kerry Edwards campaign there. Thank you, Meredith.
And we've got some more numbers for you coming up. Don't go away.
From WGNO New Orleans, this is ABC 26 News, The Votes.
Let's take a look again at some of the Senate race numbers there. These are the numbers to succeed John Breaux in the U.S. Senate. And here they are with 89% of the precincts reporting now. David Vitter with 51% of the vote. Chris John now up to 30% at a distance, John Kennedy there with 15% of the vote. And Arthur Morrell just 2%. And the rest of the candidates there totaling up 2%.
So it's an exciting night for David Vitter. Certainly, Liz Reyes is at David Vitter's headquarters out in Kenner. Liz?
Yeah, we are live at the Airport Hilton here. Susie and Michael, I feel as though I'm at a disco. This is such a festive atmosphere. And as these numbers continue to come in here tonight, they continue to party. You know, as we mentioned earlier, they were thinking this was going to be a runoff, but as more of these numbers come in, they are clearly looking at the possibility that David Vitter could win this outright tonight. Of course, we're still waiting on those final numbers to come in and more precincts to come in. We're told that David Vitter is expected to come down and address his supporters sometime after 10. So we're all on watch right now. And as you can see, they're anxiously awaiting for him to come down. So we're going to bring that to you as soon as it happens. That's the latest from us here at a very loud, rowdy, euphoric David Vitter campaign headquarters in Canada. We're going to send it back to you.
All right, thanks, Liz. We'll check back in with you later.
Let's bring in our political analyst again, Jeff Crouere. Jeff, what we're beginning to see here, as more percentage of the precincts are reported, David Vitter's percent, at least to avoid a runoff, are actually shrinking.
Right. I mean, it's nail-biting time for both Vitter and John, but as you saw from that shot, David Vitter had a lot of enthusiastic volunteers. The organization that David Vitter had, I think, is one of the key reasons why he did so well tonight. A tremendous statewide organization.
What about Kennedy? I mean, he's just fallen off the map here.
Kennedy relied upon Bill Jefferson a lot, and I don't think Bill Jefferson delivered for John Kennedy. He also relied upon Cleo Field's bump in the Baton Rouge area and an African-American organization in Shreveport. It didn't happen for John Kennedy. Again, the lack of money. Even Chris John had a lot more money than John Kennedy. But Vitter had the most, and it was obvious with all the commercials and the organization he had.
Is this a matter of smart strategy here by the Republican Party in Louisiana saying, look, let's just put one candidate in this race?
Extremely smart. They've never done that. The Republicans always have multiple candidates fighting it out, and then they have a defeat in the end. This time they united behind David Vitter. Party leaders like Buddy Roemer looked at the race but decided not to run, and that was key. He had everyone behind him, and the organization paid off. He spent a lot of time up in Alexandria, creating a lot of support in North and Central Louisiana, and of course his base down here in Metairie. And it looks like he put it all together for, regardless, even if he ends up at 49%, still a very impressive run for David Vitter tonight.
Okay, Jeff, we'll check in with you later. Thank you so much.
And we also want to mention, we just found out that 240 precincts in Orleans Parish still have not reported just yet.
We'll be back with more. Don't go away.